Hello everyone, welcome back. Get comfortable, relax, and enjoy today's exciting fanfic. Now, let's begin part 1. Tsunade wiped the tears from her eyes, then leaned down and ever so gently kissed the formerly so vibrant little loudmouth on his forehead, cursing Orochimaru and Kabuto with all her being. She stifled a sob and then found herself leaning down again, placing another kiss on Naruto's lips. Another sob came and forced itself out. More tears flowed from her eyes despite her best efforts. With a grieving wail, she wrapped her arms around his body and pulled him against her. No, 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 not again, no, she chanted. Dan, Nawaki, she whimpered, then kissed his corpse once again. Dan, oh, Dan, she thought, never noticing that this kiss wasn't anywhere near as innocent as the two first. Come back to me, Dan, please. Don't leave me, she thought as her tongue slipped into Naruto's mouth. MGHLF. Dan, 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 Tsunade mentally chanted, never noticing that the corpse was attempting to get away from her. At first, at least. After a few moments, Naruto wrapped his arms around the much older woman and hesitantly started participating in the kiss. Orochimaru was so stunned at the unexpected development that he never noticed Jiraiya before it was too late. Weakened from the poison and tired from the fight, Jiraiya used a very unusual technique, at least for him. He snuck up behind his former teammate and slit his throat with a kunai, letting the corpse drop to the ground. With a negligent flip, Jiraiya launched the bladed weapon towards the prone Kabuto, penetrating his skull. Heal that, you bastard, he absently thought, looking over at the necking pair with an expression that shifted between disgust and intrigue. Hey, lovebirds, get a room, will ya? He exclaimed in an annoyed tone of voice. While he was genuinely fond of both of them and had given up any serious hope of ever getting somewhere with his crush on Tsunade a long time ago, it still irked him something fiercely to see her smooching with Naruto of all people. Jiraiya's voice caused Tsunade to focus on the present instead of her memories of Dan, and she opened her eyes, staring with shock straight into Naruto's deep blue eyes, staring into her own with disbelief, confusion and barely restrained heat plainly written all over them. She tore herself away from him with a surprised exclamation, hardly able to believe her own eyes as she noticed that the young man was alive. Naruto. Why yo, you're alive, she exclaimed. Hey, why ye yeah. He stuttered out in agreement, a fierce blush on his face. You're alive? She asked again, as if unable to believe it. Yeah. He repeated, scratching the back of his head, still sporting a furious blush. Naruto, you're alive, she shouted happily, then pulled him back into a fierce hug, tears of happiness streaming down her cheeks. This was how it all started, and while I would like to claim that it was innocently enough, it certainly wasn't. Frenching with a teenager doesn't constitute as innocently enough, in my eyes. What is it? Do I have something on my face? Tsunade grumbled, glaring over at Naruto, who had kept sneaking looks at her all the way back to the hotel and was still at it, now when they were on the way back to Konoha. He blushed at having been caught and looked away, shaking his head in denial. She sighed. She knew that wasn't it. He probably couldn't keep his mind off that kiss, the little pervert. Of course, neither could she, but that was different. After all, she was a responsible adult who knew that she'd done something wrong. It was only natural for her to ponder the incident, wallowing in guilt. It had been so wrong, so irresponsible, so soft, so so wrong, so very wrong. Yes, wrong, that was it. Not nice at all. Certainly not exciting. Just because she hadn't been close to anyone, never even hugged anyone but Shizune since shortly after Dan's death and leaving Konoha, wasn't a reason for her to get all weak in the knees over some bratty loudmouth. Giving your little boy toy the cold shoulder, Tsunade Heim. Jiraiya commented with a bemused grin. He started, but was cut off. If you want to see the next sunset, I suggest that you shut up now, Jiraiya. Tsunade growled. Naruto-kun, Shizune whispered, carefully nudging his shoulder. Why does Jiraiya-sama keep referring to you as Tsunade-sama's boy toy and loverboy? She asked, a question which wasn't answered by anything other than a furious blush and Naruto looking away. You mean, you are her boy toy? It's actually true, she hissed. but not quietly enough, as the two senin apparently heard her. Jiraiya burst into laughter, while Tsunade suddenly started blushing and spluttering protests, which didn't help her case at all. No, it was just an innocent kiss. Well, perhaps not all that innocent, but it wasn't on purpose. Well, I mean, I kissed him on purpose, but not. I wasn't. He isn't. Tsunade spluttered, then clenched her fists. Jiraiya, stop laughing this instant. She bellowed and tilted her head back. He's not my boy toy, she howled to the skies. Of course not, Tsunade-sama. Shizune agreed, making soothing gestures. I believe you. You've never lied to me before. Other than when money is involved. Or gambling. Or that time when you got that rash. And when. I get the general idea, Shizune. Tsunade snarled, interrupting her assistant and travel companion. I'm telling the truth, though. He's not my boy toy. Then, he's your boyfriend? Shizune asked with a note of horror in her voice, then took a step back as Tsunade's eyebrows started jumping while she clenched and unclenched her fists. Boyfriend. Naruto exclaimed. BBBBUB, but I've never been a boyfriend before. He protested. I dunno what to do. Congratulations, brat, Jiraiya said, slapping Naruto's shoulders enthusiastically. Remember to treat her right, or I'll yank out all your nasal hair, one by one. He added on a more serious note, though the glimmer in his eyes revealed that he wasn't all that serious about it. But since he was looking away, neither of his travel companions saw it. But she's so old. I don't want an old lady for a girlfriend. Naruto exclaimed, then took several steps backwards as Tsunade focused a deadly glare at him. Then again, she is very cute. He hastily added, causing Tsunade's face to brighten considerably, which also had the effect of teaching Naruto the value of compliments when dealing with the farer. Of course, he had little idea of how to compliment a female, which is why he said what he did next. Plus, she's got the biggest set of that I've ever seen. He exclaimed, causing Jiraiya to bend over, howling with laughter, Shizune to self-consciously cross her arms over her own chest and Tsunade to trip, slamming into the ground and causing significant pain in just mentioned attributes, as they hadn't exactly been designed with face vaults in mind. I'd start running now, if I were you. Shizune murmured, giving Naruto a slight push to get him started. Huh, wah, oh, Naruto started, only to trail off in sudden understanding as he saw the look Tsunade gave him as she started getting back onto her feet. I think I'll scout the road up ahead. See y'all later, he exclaimed, then took off running. Shikamaru was right, girls are nothing but trouble and girlfriends even more so. He howled, as Tsunade took off after him. I am not your girlfriend, you little runt. Come back here, so I can kill you. Tsunade screamed as she took off in furious pursuit, the blonde pigtails fluttering in her wake. Nightmare. This is a nightmare. Oh, please Kami, let me wake up. Wake me up now. Tsunade slurred, reaching for another ceramic bottle of sake. Man problems? The bartender asked, having seen the symptoms before. He's not my boyfriend. Tsunade bellowed, then belched and hastily emptied the bottle, without even bothering to use the way too small saucer, opting instead of guzzling it down straight from the bottle. I'm going to kill Jiraiya. Then I'm going to kill Naruto. After that, I'll kill Shizune, just to get rid of all the witnesses. She groused and the bartender raised an eyebrow, putting another bottle in front of the irate woman. Not just a love triangle, but a love square. He was impressed, he hadn't had anyone tell him about one of those for quite a while now. Wanna talk about it? He offered, just barely managing to restrain his curiosity, an offer which the shit-faced drunk woman took him up upon, unloading all her woes on the bartender/innkeeper. Unfortunately, her alcohol-riddled mind made her tale somewhat confusing. But the bartender thought he'd managed to make sense of her slurred ramblings after a while. The woman was a nin. Her teammate had a crush on her ever since they started training together as kids. She now lived in a lesbian relationship with a woman named Shizune. Then she'd just recently gotten the hots for this guy Naruto and kissed him, in front of her lesbian partner and her old teammate Jiraiya. There were also a couple of other guys she mentioned, but they were apparently out of the picture now. He hesitated for a few moments. He'd seen Shizune earlier, as she was the one who had arranged for the rooms. Naruto and Jiraiya were apparently training. Shizune had headed straight for the baths and Tsunade had headed straight for the bar. Thus, he still had the opportunity for some amusing mischief, as none of them had gotten their keys yet. His eyes sparkled at the thought that he would be doing his part in resolving this whole amusing mess the four of them had somehow wound up in. While Tsunade kept on guzzling down sake, the barkeeper switched two of the occupants of the two rooms, putting Jiraiya with Shizune and Tsunade with Naruto. The alcohol-riddled Tsunade would probably do the nasty with Naruto, and with a bit of luck, Jiraiya was charming enough to sway the lesbian. But if not, at least Tsunade and this Naruto guy would have an amusing evening. When Shizune returned from the baths, the barkeeper handed her the key to her room. Tsunade refused to come along with her, saying she still had a lot of drinking left to do in order to forget her horrible day. Shizune eventually left Tsunade to her drinking and headed for the room, accompanied by a servant carrying her backpack and with Tun trailing the two of them. Jiraiya was the next arrival and he didn't hesitate to team up with Tsunade in her attempt to drink the bar out of alcohol, guzzling down bottle after bottle in a desperate attempt to catch up with what Tsunade had already imbibed. Naruto didn't show, and when the bartender asked Jiraiya about the last member of their party, the response he got was that the fool was still training, trying to master some new technique. He muttered a curse as his shift ended and he had to leave, not getting to see the results of his brilliant work in the name of love. But he supposed that a good deed was its own reward and that he should settle for having been of assistance. The new bartender kept on serving the two senin, until they mutually decided to stagger off to bed, grabbing their keys and heading upstairs. Tsunade didn't take much notice of the fact that Shizune wasn't lying in any of the futons, she just stumbled towards the nearest one and flopped down into it, burying herself under the covers. Jiraiya did notice that one of the futons was taken, but didn't think much of it, except for a mild bewilderment that Naruto had given up so quickly and gotten his key without so much as a hi to his brilliant, gorgeous and fantastic teacher. He also noticed Tun, but just punted the sleeping critter out of the way and then collapsed into his futon. Naruto only got back a couple of hours later, sleepily gave his name and received a key after being told that his stuff had already been taken to his room. Naruto shuffled upstairs and entered the room, grumbling to himself at the loud drunken snoring which echoed throughout the room. The perverted hermit was a disgusting slob, but Naruto had sort of gotten used to it by now, even if he'd never heard these particular sounds before. It was a lighter and higher-pitched snore than he was used to. Stupid arrow senin, Naruto grumbled, kicking the lump under the blankets, nursing a faint hope that it'd work and shut the older man up for a while. What he hadn't expected was for a slender hand that definitively didn't belong to the arrow senin to whip out from underneath the blanket, grab his ankle and yank him off his feet. Oof, Naruto grunted, rubbing his sore posterior. What the hell? He muttered, crawled forward and yanked the blanket off the lump in the futon. Gah! He exclaimed in shock as he unveiled not the senin he was expecting, but the other one he was traveling with. What are you doing here, old lady? Naruto demanded. Sleep in. Tsunade murmured in response, her breath reeking of booze. Well, stop it. This is my room. Get up. Naruto insisted. Really now, Dan, wouldn't you prefer it if I went down on you? She drawled with a drunken grin, fumbling around for him. Aha! Got you, she purred triumphantly. Come here. Wah! Old lady Tsunade. Stop it. Naruto protested as he found himself pulled towards her, then found himself unable to protest against anything at all, as his face was suddenly pressed against her ample mounds. Though he sorely wished that he could protest at the top of his lungs, as the octopus lady started peeling his clothes off. Tsunade-sama, what happened to you? Shizune demanded as she saw her beloved mentor's bruised face the following morning. She had a black eye, well she actually had two, but one seemed to be more from someone having landed a punch rather than Tsunade just being hung over. Her lips were also slightly swollen and her upper lip had a cut in it. It wasn't serious, it could be healed in less than a minute, but Tsunade was probably too hungover to do it herself at the moment. Don't wanna talk about it. Tsunade muttered as she seated herself, glaring over at Jiraiya, who was even more bruised than her and currently unconscious by the looks of it. What's with him? He snuck into our room last night, a mistake he won't make again. Shizune growled, cracking her knuckles with a satisfied expression. She had been surprised as hell to find Jiraiya sleeping in the same room as her, but the brutal beating she'd given the sleeping and hungover toad hermit had cleared her head pretty fast. Where were you all night, by the way? I entered the wrong room myself. Tsunade mumbled, and Shizune paled as Naruto showed up, with a bruise in the shape of a palm on his left cheek. Naruto-kun, what happened to you? Shizune asked with a horrified look. Don't wanna talk about it, he grunted and seated himself as far away from Tsunade as possible. What is wrong? What happened to the two of you? Shizune demanded, then trailed off. Wait, Tsunade-sama entered the wrong room. Was gone all night. You are both bruised. Are you two involved in a machistic relationship? She exclaimed as realization struck. Macho. Yep, that's me, Naruto replied proudly, while Tsunade was still spluttering, trying to voice a protest. Oh my, Shizune exclaimed, blushing furiously. No, that's not it at all. Tsunade exclaimed. Sure it is. I'm a macho man, Naruto blustered, puffing his chest out and flexing his muscles. Naruto, that's not what machistic means. Tsunade groaned, slumping forward over the table and slamming her forehead against the wooden surface several times. Which didn't exactly help convince Shizune that she wasn't a closet machist. I heard that Tsunade, one of the 3 legendary Sennin, is going to be the new Hokage. A villager exclaimed. I heard that too. A second agreed, nodding sagely. I heard that she's got a younger boyfriend. A third whispered conspiratorically. Someone said that she's all gaga over that demon kid. The first added. Naruto. That brat. The third exclaimed in disbelief. Impossible. That monster. That awful horrible child who defiled the Hokage monument. The second said. Monster. A terribly icy voice interjected, causing the 3 villagers to turn around and come face to face with their new Hokage. Naruto isn't a monster, you feeble-minded ingrates. He has saved this village twice. He's a hero, Tsunade snarled. And if I hear anyone referring to him as a monster again, I'm personally going to rip the Kyuubi out of him and shove it into whomever utters those words, just to see if that shithead can deal with the responsibility of having a demon sealed in them any better than Naruto does. She continued and focused a terrible glare at the 3 villagers. How about it? Any takers? She asked, causing the 3 now terrified villagers to bolt, whimpering with terror. Ingrates, Tsunade muttered, then stalked onwards towards the hospital. What she didn't know, as she'd only heard the end of the villagers' conversation and hadn't bothered to follow them to see what they spoke of after she left, was that her defense of Naruto had practically turned rumor into fact in the mind of the villagers, as those 3 spread the word that Tsunade was fiercely protective of her young lover. When even Shizune got involved in the gossiping, the fires were fanned and the rumors spiced up with all sort of kinky details regarding the unusual couple's deviant preferences. Man, having a girlfriend is such a bother. Naruto groused, slurping up a few strings of noodles as he complained about the current situation to his friends, who had gathered to see if they could wheedle a few stories about traveling with Jiraiya out of him. None of the people around the table noticed how Hinata froze in shock after hearing Naruto's announcement. You got a girlfriend? Shikamaru inquired in disbelief. Yeah, and you won't believe how she treats me, either. It's nothing like the stories. Naruto grumbled, nursing his still sore cheek. Before things had gotten too far and nothing else seemed to work, he'd slugged Tsunade right in the kisser. He had to do it 2 times, to get her to snap out of it and let him go. Unfortunately, she'd responded by slapping him across the room after the second punch. The 2 of them had slept in separate ends of the room after that, being too tired to bother getting a new room. You were definitively right, Shikamaru. Girls are troublesome. Do you guys kiss? Ten asked. Who is she? Ino asked, looking suspiciously at first Sakura, then Hinata. Forget kissing. Have you guys done the nasty yet? Kiba inquired with a feral smirk. Kiss. Yeah, she's done that all right. Naruto exclaimed, blushing furiously as he recalled 2 such incidents. Have you touched her? Shino inquired, blinking owlishly behind his glasses as everybody suddenly turned to stare at the normally quiet bug boy. Well, yeah, Naruto agreed after a few moments, thinking back on how she'd grabbed his hands and put them on all sorts of embarrassing places before he'd smacked her to knock some sense into the desperate perverted old woman. Hinata's normally pale face was now stark red with embarrassment, and there was a horribly distressed look in her eyes, tears gathering in the corner of her white eyes. Have you two gone all the way, yet? Kiba asked. All the way? No. Quite a ways, I guess. Naruto hesitantly responded. All the way from where they met her to Konoha, which was quite a stretch, but far from all the way. There were hundreds of other ways. Oh, you sly dog you. Ino exclaimed, then looked sheepishly at Kiba and Akamaru. Sorry guys. I didn't mean any offense. None taken. Kiba assured her, and Akamaru woofed his agreement. Who is she, Naruto? Sakura asked. Yeah, who is it? Choji added between mouthfuls of ramen. It's. Naruto started, only to be cut off. Naruto-kun. Tsunade-sama wants you right now. Shizune panted as she came running into the diner, breathing deeply a couple of times. You shouldn't keep your girlfriend waiting, Naruto-kun, she added as she saw that he hadn't moved by the time she'd regained your breath. The Hokage. Ten exclaimed in shock, leaning back in her seat. You're Tsunade's boyfriend, she demanded to know, wondering just what her legendary idol saw in the boy she had mostly ignored ever since becoming aware of him. Oh, man, she's hot. Kiba approved, slapping Naruto's back. I knew that you've always said that you wanted to be the Hokage, but I didn't think you meant that you wanted to be with the Hokage. Choji commented. Here, if she wants you as desperately as it sounds, you might need these more urgently than I do. Shino said, putting a box of condoms down in front of Naruto. Yes, practice safe. You're too immature to become a father. Sakura insisted, ignoring the hurt look Naruto directed at her. Come on, Naruto-kun. She's waiting for you, Shizune said, picking up the box of condoms and placing them inside his jacket, before pushing him into motion. Ah, Naruto-kun and Tsunade-sama. Quadruple A arg. Hinata screamed once she'd somewhat recovered from the shock, which was about 15 minutes later, when everybody else had already left. She did surprise the hell out of the owner and waitress, however. You wanted me. Tsunade-chan. Naruto stuttered hesitantly, as he was shoved into the room by Shizune, who had grown tired of watching Naruto stand in front of the door to the Hokage's office, reach out for the handle, only to let his hand drop and then repeat the process all over again. He had been doing that for the last 5 minutes, and it was starting to annoy her, when she finally took action to get him out of her sight. Tsunade-chan. Tsunade repeated, as if tasting the term, unsure of what to think of it. Naruto was just as hesitant about it. Sakura-chan sounded fine and easily rolled off his lips. Tsunade-chan did not. But calling his girlfriend old lady? No, he didn't know much about personal relationships, but he had a faint inkling that doing that would lead to a severely pissed off girlfriend. And that he knew was a bad thing. He'd overheard that much, at least around the village, as he grew up. He squirmed nervously, shifting his weight from foot to foot, as Tsunade kept repeating, Tsunade-chan, under her breath, looking right ahead with an unfocused stare. Tsunade-chan. You wanted me, Naruto reminded her, which seemed to sort of snap her out of her daze. But I'm not sure if I'm ready for that yet. Shino gave me these condoms, but, he added, a statement which served to completely snap her out of her daze. Condoms, she bellowed, causing Naruto to take several steps back, staring fearfully at Tsunade as she fumed behind her desk. A moment later, Shizune and 2 clerks rushed into the room. I've got some, Shizune exclaimed, holding up an unopened package. How did you two manage to run out so fast? Did you drop yours on the way over, Naruto-kun? Here are the condoms you wanted, Hokage-sama. One of the clerks said, brandishing an open box of them. I've got some too. Take it easy. What's the rush? The second clerk added, holding out 2 singles towards Naruto, then saw the unopened box of 50 that Naruto was already holding. You guys need more. Yikes. I wish that I had a 10th of your stamina, kid. He exclaimed. You 3, get out. Tsunade snarled, pointing at Shizune and the 2 desk nins, who instantly scurried out of the room, leaving the condoms behind. And you're staying right there, Tsunade added with a feral snap at Naruto, who had attempted to leave with the others. Girlfriends are so troublesome, he whimpered, wondering if he hadn't spent a little too much time around Shikamaru lately. Oh, we are we? She thundered, only to blink at the sound of a muted thump from the window. She looked aside and saw a stunned-looking Kakashi scramble up from the floor after having fallen down from the windowsill he had been sitting on as he heard her bellowed question. You mean that the rumors are true? He exclaimed, his one visible eye bulging out of its socket. He hastily scurried over towards Naruto, looking down at him with admiration shining in his eye. Naruto. You have surpassed my every expectation. Whatever anyone else says, you will forever be a real man in my eyes. He breathed, just barely managing to keep his voice even. Here, I want you to have this. May it be of as much joy to you as it has been to me. He said and gave Naruto a worn copy of Come, Paradise. Oh, don't worry, I have 3 other copies. He added after seeing Naruto hesitate in accepting it, misinterpreting the reason for his student's hesitancy. Kakashi. Tsunade growled, clenching her fists as she stalked towards him. I'd run if I were you, Kakashi-sensei. Naruto hinted as he accepted the book. She can be sort of violent, he added in a low murmur. So I've heard. You too, from what I've been hearing. Have fun, you too. Kakashi stated, then somersaulted backwards over the charging Tsunade, then leapt backwards out of the window, his eye widening even further as he saw Tsunade crash into Naruto, bringing the 2 of them to the floor. Oh, my, she could hardly even wait until I was out before jumping him. He exclaimed, feeling his face become flushed. Tsunade bellowed, screaming right out from pure frustration as she managed to overhear Kakashi's final words. Yikes. Who would have known the kid that it in him? One of the clerks commented on the other side of the door to the Hokage's office, as his coworker and Shizune heard Tsunade's muted cry despite the soundproofing. Nothing but trouble, Naruto groused, rubbing several small bruises, as he waited for his ramen. After Kakashi's abrupt departure, Tsunade had been too irate to make much sense, so Naruto had left rather hastily in order to give her a chance to calm down without ever finding out why she wanted to see him in the first place. He brought out the book he'd gotten from Kakashi, fingering the worn cover for a while, before he shrugged and opened it, deciding to have a look at it to see just what all the fuzz was about. Several hours later, with only a handful of bowls of ramen consumed, Naruto slammed the book shut, blinking several times. And here I thought Jiraiya was perverted before, he muttered, shaking his head. Well, at least he's got a knack for writing, he admitted with a fierce blush, as he recalled several rather lurid passages. Well, that would describe just about any part of the book, but Naruto was recalling some extremely lurid passages. There had even been pictures, diagrams and at the end, a table with perverted statistics and complicated formulas for sensual prowess. He'd just received more education in the last couple of hours than in his entire life up until now. Which was why he had no idea of just how flawed his newfound knowledge of or how much trouble he'd wind up in because of it. Fortunately, he was now aware of the fact that there were several holes in his knowledge and experience base. Unfortunately, the book had given him the entirely wrong idea of how to go about fixing that situation. Tsunade-chan. Naruto called out. Zizinerk. Tsunade-chan. He tried again, a little louder. Zizinerf. Tsunade-chan. Arjzer. Tsunade-chan. Wah. Whu. We. Tsunade grumbled, as she slowly struggled into semi-wakefulness. I've got something for you. Honey. Naruto hesitantly informed her. Mwah. She drowsily responded, sitting up in her bed. Hwhu. Nartho. She slurred. I've got something for you, Tsunade-chan. He tried again. What? She croaked, before yawning sleepily, the situation not yet fully registering in her sleep-riddled mind. My undying love for you. Naruto quoted straight from Jiraiya's book. Please, open up the gates of thy rosy heaven and allow me to dwell therein, he added. Mackay. Tsunade agreed with a sigh, throwing off her covers and starting to spread her legs, before she froze with her right hand pulling her panties to the side. Her eyes burst wide open and she focused an astonished glare at Naruto. Naruto. She exploded, her veins throbbing and eyebrows jumping. Prepare to receive my raging samurai, wench. Naruto continued quoting from Jiraiya's book. The fact that Tsunade recognized the cheesy origins of that particular phrase did not sit at all well with her, and she decided to clobber Jiraiya the next time she saw him for writing that ridiculous piece of crap book. After she had killed Naruto for making her life hell. Pervert! She screamed, plucked him up by the collar of his orange jumpsuit, and then punted him out of her bedroom, by the way of the closed window. Unfortunately, Tsunade was too distracted by just being awakened and her anger to hear the telltale sound of a shadow clone popping out of existence. Naruto, who was currently in hiding under her bed, scratched his jaw as he pondered an alternate approach to the situation. He laid completely still and listened as Tsunade grumbled under her breath for a while, before she returned to the bed and bundled up underneath the covers. Minutes later, she started snoring again. He brought out pen and paper from one of his pockets, then glanced down at a list he'd written, before crossing over, sallying forth, which was the chapter in Come, Paradise he'd drawn inspiration for this particular approach from. Instead, he turned to the next line on the list. Taking of the prize, he quoted off the paper, nodding to himself as he directed his attention to his backpack, which held all the supplies he would need for this one. He had thought that it was a mite bit extreme, but heck, the girl in the chapter hadn't even been the guy's girlfriend at the time. Perhaps it wasn't so extreme, and besides, considering what she had done to his shadow clone, this particular approach would be a whole lot safer for him. Tsunade instantly woke up and attempted to move, only to find herself unable to do so. What the? She thought, before her train of thought was derailed. She would have opened her mouth to cry out a protest at the sudden pain in her rear posterior, but her mouth was already open, something solid shoved into it. She tried to force it out, but nearly choked as whatever it was, didn't move more than half an inch at the most and then returned to its former position by itself. She hastily analyzed what her body was telling her, her eyes roaming around taking in information. She was in her room. Check. She was in her bed. Check. She was clad only in panties and bra. Check. She was gagged. Check. She was tied up. Check. Somebody was spanking her. Check. This could only mean one thing. The world's worst pervert had finally snapped and did something there was no way in hell she could ever forgive him for. Trying to peep at the women's baths was one thing, but this. She'd kill him. Jiraiya, you asshole, she mentally raged and swiveled her head around, only for her eyes to bulge as she spotted a blonde brat clad in a telltale orange jumpsuit kneeling next to her. Naruto. What the? She thought, then recalled the previous incident. Oh, I am so going to kill that kid. Once I've yanked every single hair off his entire body, one by one, that is. But first, I'm going to have him flogged, right in the middle of the town square. While he's coated in honey. The Aburame clan can probably lend me some nasty wasps or something. Damn it, but that stings. When I'm out of this crap, I'll tan his hide so badly that he won't be able to sit for a full month, she mentally raved. She couldn't form seals, not even one-handed ones, as both her hands and fingers were kept still by stiff gloves, probably the same sort the Anbu used to transport dangerous captured nins who couldn't be allowed to form hand seals. Where he'd managed to get hold of two of those, would have to be looked into. He'd tied her up real good too, she couldn't get any decent leverage to break the rope she'd been tied with. She could feel the rope strain from the immense strength she possessed, but without decent leverage, she couldn't apply it to the fullest. Damn him, why did he have to take this particular approach, she cursed. Did the snot-nosed little bastard read my diary, she wondered, trying desperately and failing miserably to suppress her bodily and mental reactions to the current situation. It's Naruto. He's a kid. He's a stubborn brat. He's a sniveling little punk. I'm nearly 5 times older than him. I'm not getting excited by this. I'm not, she mentally insisted, blushing scarlet both from the treatment and the realization that she could feel moisture start to gather in a very embarrassing place. She hoped, truly hoped, that he wouldn't comment on the smell or she'd just die of shame. If anyone heard of this. Oh, Cammy, she mentally whimpered. Not excited. Heh, heh, heh. Naruto mock laughed from above her. Firm and supple, he commented as he fondled her in a very inexperienced manner. You'll fetch a nice price at the market. He chuckled. Naruto, you rat bastard, Tsunade mentally growled and increased her futile struggles to free herself. Oh, a feisty one, I'm going to enjoy breaking you in. Naruto purred, actually purred. She let out a moan around her gag as his hand trailed over her bruised ass cheeks. Oh, you like that, do you? He asked and she shook her head furiously in denial. He purred and she shook her head again, even more furiously than before. Why this? Why now? Tsunade mentally wailed, cursing her treasonous body for betraying her. Her were rock hard at this point and she didn't doubt for a second that her panties were starting to get moist from her emissions. Naruto. You've been a naughty girl, Tsunade-chan. Behaving badly. As your future master, it's my duty to correct such misbehavior and punish your transgressions. Naruto quoted, only changing the name of the girl from the book for Tsunade's own, adding Chan to it. No, don't do this, she mentally pleaded. The only reason why she even had a copy of Jiraiya's book herself, was because of this particular chapter. It never failed to get her in the mood when it was time to provide some self-stimulation, no matter how many times she'd read it. She could so easily imagine herself as the captured girl and Dan as the stern master. Breaking her, punishing her, training her and using her. For a moment, she saw that image before her inner sight, then moaned as Dan was suddenly replaced with Naruto. Much to her own disgust and shame, she found that particular image even more erotic than the one of her and Dan. No. Dear Cammy, no, he's a kid. This is wrong. Wrong on so many levels. I can't possibly be turned on by this. This is a bad dream. That's all it is. Just a very bad dream. Oh, God. This is so hot. No. Bad thoughts. Bad thoughts. He's too young for me to get excited by him. Bad girl. Bad girl. Yes, I'm a bad girl. I need to be pun. No. I need to get my head examined. I'm Tsunade, legendary Sennin. Medic Nin. Konoha's 5th Hokage. This brat doesn't excite me at all, she thought, but lacked any real fire in her mental protests. She was turned on. He was exciting her. Oh, Cammy, how he excited her. If she was set free now, she didn't know if she'd tear him a new asshole or screw his brains out. Yes. Punish me. I don't understand girls. Naruto commented to himself as he munched down on some ramen, reading Jiraiya's book again and wondering where he had went wrong. According to the book, Tsunade should have been his devoted girlfriend, kind and agreeable, by now. Or slave, as the book called it. But he guessed that meant girlfriend, considering the sort of things the hero of the book and the girl did with each other. Instead, she'd started crying when he set her free. She'd sobbed, cried rivers and hugged him, blabbering nonsensical things and apologizing for only the Cammy knew what. He hadn't been able to make out much of what she'd actually said, but he'd been able to make out that she was sorry for something, before she fell asleep with her arms still wrapped around him. She was probably sorry for being such a lousy girlfriend, he reasoned. Their relationship was nothing at all like in the stories he'd read and listen to. She didn't go with him on dates. She wasn't affectionate all that often and always after she had been, she seemed upset about it. She abused him and shouted at him. He scratched the back of his head as he pondered his mental findings. Then again, he wasn't the best of boyfriends either. He had been shirking his responsibilities. He hadn't asked her out on a date, so how could she have gone with him on one? Other than last night, he hadn't been very affectionate with her. When they first kissed after his fight with Kabuto, he'd responded, but only after a while, and then he hadn't been aware of just whom he had been kissing at first. As he first came to, he'd been wrapped up in a fantasy about Sakura, so he'd been quite confused when he came to and found himself staring at Tsunade. The second time, he'd punched her twice to get her to lay off him. He shouted at her too. Naruto gasped. Not only wasn't he amongst the best of boyfriends, he was a lousy boyfriend. That didn't sit all too well with how he thought of himself. He was Uzumaki Naruto, he was the best. Well, not counting Sasuke. He was a little behind there. Not much, mind you. But he'd always sort of looked up to Sasuke, though he'd never ever admit that to anyone. But Sasuke the bastard was clearly lousy boyfriend material too, so here Naruto had a chance to actually prove that he was better than Sasuke at something. Yush! Naruto shouted, clenched his fists and pumped himself up. I'm going to be the best. He bellowed, slapped down money for the ramen he'd ate on the table, grabbed the book and rushed out into the streets. Or tried to, at least. Ooh, Naruto-kun. The raging fires of youth burneth hotly within your boyish veins. I am impressed. Truly, the blazing enthusiasm displayed here before me warms my heart and fills me with renewed respect for the immeasurable infernos of adolescent determination. Guy shouted from beside him, having snatched Naruto up in a crushing hug after hearing his proud declaration. Guy put Naruto down and made the nice guy pose TM, flashing his pearly whites and giving Naruto a thumb up in wholehearted approval. I support you wholeheartedly, and to show my appreciation for walking the path of perfection, will give you a grand gift. Guy declared with fires burning in his eyes. Another suit, so you have something appropriate to wear when the other one is being washed. He happily announced and whipped out a green jumpsuit from one of the many pockets in his vest. Wow, thanks, Guy-sensei, Naruto exclaimed and happily accepted the gift. Jiraiya had somehow managed to lose the other one 3 times. Naruto had found it the first 2 incidents, but after the 3rd time it had gone missing, he hadn't been able to find it again. Though the campfire that evening had smelled a little weird, come to think of it. And how Jiraiya had managed to lose it underneath a large rock the 2nd time, was quite beyond Naruto. A good deed is its own reward. I require no words of thanks, but I appreciate it nonetheless. Now, sally forth and let the ravaging inferno of your determination blaze a trail towards the perfection you aspire to. Guy said, shedding a few tears. But be prepared, for Lee, my beloved student too walks the same path as you do. Expect fierce competition, a rivalry to rival that shared between my glorious self and the hip Kakashi. Yosh! Naruto exclaimed, pumping a fist in the air, before heading out into the street, as he had intended earlier. Only to be stopped again, as he crashed into someone, going down in a cloud of dust and pile of tangled limbs. Ow, ow, Hinata, na Naruto-kun. Perfect. Hinata, you're a girl, right? Naruto exclaimed as he jumped back onto his feet, pulling Hinata up with him. Wah, huh, yyys. Hinata stuttered, dusting herself off, blushing furiously at the close encounter of the Naruto kind she'd just experienced, as well as his unexpected happiness and inquiry at seeing her. He noticed her. He noticed her as a woman. Great. I need a girl. Come on. Naruto revealed in a conspiratoric whisper, then grabbed her left hand and tugged her along, as he darted through the city, heading for one of the training grounds in the forest surrounding Konoha. Yo need. Hinata stammered, blushing into a beet red, looking down at the ground in stark embarrassment. But Naruto-kun, I'm not so sure if I'm ready for, she said, trailing off, unable to bring herself to finish the sentence. Don't worry, I'll talk you through everything. You just need to do as I tell you and we'll be fine. Naruto declared happily. Nani, Naruto-kun, you pervert. Hinata squeaked. Huh, oh, don't worry, this is Kakashi-sensei's book. Naruto responded, not quite getting what Hinata was getting at, but believing it had something to do with the book he was carrying. It was very perverted after all, no doubt she believed him a pervert too for having it. He hastily put it into his equipment pouch, before anybody else saw him lugging that thing around. But I'm A versus V versus V versus V Veer V versus Veer. Hinata stuttered, but didn't manage to complete her sentence before Naruto cut her off. A very pretty girl. Naruto agreed happily. A bit weird too, but that's okay. I can kinda like a girl like you. Naruto-kun. Hinata squeaked in acute embarrassment as she was dragged off to only Naruto knew where. WWHW, what do you want me to do? Hinata squeaked out after Naruto had led her to a currently unused training ground. We're going to do it here. Yes, it's perfect. Naruto exclaimed cheerfully and Hinata paled even further. Naruto-kun certainly had odd taste. This wasn't very romantic at all. She certainly hadn't pictured her first time being at a training ground. I've never done this before. Hinata stuttered out in a barely audible whisper. Yeah, me either. Naruto cheerfully admitted. I should have thought of this way sooner. Practice makes perfect, after all. He laughed. PPRP practice. Hinata squealed, her eyes bulging out of their sockets. Yeah, if I'm going to be a hip and great boyfriend, I have to practice to perfect my techniques. He revealed and turned around to face Hinata with a determined expression. Aha! What a delectable little treat. All of this, just for me. He announced, looking Hinata up and down with a focused gaze that caused Hinata's heart to skip a few beats and made her entire body freeze up. NNN Naruto. Hinata exclaimed breathlessly. Yes, perfect. I knew that you were the right girl for this. Naruto exclaimed happily, before he got all serious and determined again. Such a shame though, to cover up all this beauty with such uncomplimentary clothes. He purred and took a step closer, putting his right hand on her left hip, grinning at her as he slowly slid it upwards. Then again, that can be easily corrected. Eek! Hinata squeaked as Naruto suddenly grabbed the hem of her jacket and pulled it upwards, over her body, over her head and backwards. She squeaked again as the neck of the jacket caught on the upper side of her face, locking her with her arms held straight up and her body bent slightly backwards. Naruto, she yelped, unable to see what was going on, since the thick jacket covered her eyes. She could fix that by activating her Byakugan, but was in no state of mind to do so, shocked and panicked as she was. Silence, wench, Naruto ordered. You're mine now. He said and pulled the jacket backwards, causing her to bend further back. These hips are mine. He claimed, and his right hand returned to her hip again, slowly sliding over to the other side, before it returned again. This is mine. He continued as his hand caressed the area in question. These lips are mine, he breathed, and she gasped as she felt his breath on the lower part of her face, her upper still covered by the jacket. The gasp was silenced as his lips claimed hers. I'm being kissed by Naruto-kun, Hinata mentally screamed, all non-essential bodily and mental functions shutting down as the world around her vanished until it consisted only of their joined lips and Naruto's tongue slowly conquering her mouth. This stomach belongs to me. He breathed as he pulled out of the kiss and his hand continued its daring exploration of her body. Her head darted forward and captured his lips, drawing him into another kiss. Impudent wench. We're not doing this for you, I'm your master now. You'll do what I say, we'll do it when I want it, how I want it and where I want it. Naruto drawled as he withdrew from the kiss after a few moments. These are mine to do with as I please. He continued as his hand surveyed the territory in question. Oh Kami, he's so forceful. Naruto-kun, Hinata mentally whimpered, flushing in excitement and shame, as she felt him focus his exploration on her rapidly stiffening. Yick! She shrieked as he suddenly pinched her left, hard. Mine to abuse, he purred, then started caressing them. Mine to please, he continued, and she moaned. Mine to brand, should I so desire. Perhaps I should put my mark on them and force you to bear them in public, just so people will know for certain to whom this belongs. He drawled, and she let out another moan, imagining just how embarrassed she would be if he made good on his threat. Oh, Kami, what will father say? He would be so angry, she thought, and felt herself growing even more excited as she imagined her father's irate expression, should he ever hear of something like that ever happening. Please, Naruto-kun, not that, she piped up. Silence, wench. You're mine now, mind, body and soul. If I want it, you'll do it. Naruto ordered her, and she whimpered as he pinched her again. To whom does this belong? He demanded, pinching even harder, drawing out a pained squeak from her. To you, Naruto-kun. She answered. Precisely. It's mine. You are mine. If I want you to walk through town on your hands in the, that's exactly what you'll do. If I want to put you up for sale at the market, I'll do just that. If I want you to shave off all your hair, that's what you'll do. From this moment on, what you want no longer matter. My will, your law. My desires, your commandments. My satisfaction, your duty. Is that clear, slave? But Naruto. Hinata started, but ended with a shout as he pinched her again. You have no say in this matter. What I say goes. Is that clear, slave? Naruto demanded. Why yes. Hinata said in a strained tone of voice. Yes, what? Naruto asked. Yes, Naruto-kun. What you say goes. Hinata exclaimed. A slave doesn't refer to her master like an equal. Naruto berated her. From now on, you will only address me as Jirai. Naruto-sama. Naruto-sama, master or Master Uzumaki. Is that clear, slave? He asked, berating himself for almost slipping up the dialogue. Especially as Hinata had done so well, she held up her part very well. The dialogue wasn't quite like it was in the book, but it worked well enough. He had no idea that Hinata had also read that perverted book. Then again, she was a weird sort of girl. Who knew what she did in her time off? Yes, Naruto-sama. Hinata agreed. Excellent. You learn quickly, slave. Naruto praised her and she felt her heart soar at his encouragement. You're still wearing way too many clothes, however. He snorted and her happy mood vanished as if it had never been there in the first place. But that can be easily corrected. He continued and she felt his hand trail downwards, pulling her undershirt out of her pants, rolling it upwards over her stomach, soon baring her bra-clad chest to him as the shirt was bundled up underneath her throat. The bra soon found itself pushed up there as well. Then his hand moved downward, caressing her and stomach as it went lower, grabbing the hem of her pants and pulling them down. She whimpered as she felt him take a step back and then push the pants down using one of his feet, his hand absently caressing her left thigh as he did so. Then he pulled down her panties and dragged them halfway down her legs too. What a mess you are down there, slave. You will shave it all off. Naruto commented and Hinata turned beet red in embarrassment as she realized just where he was looking. No, Naruto-kun. Don't lua. She started to protest, only to yelp as he suddenly backhanded her right, then forehanded her left, before his hand cupped her groin. Naruto-sama. He berated her. And this is mine too. Mine to look at, mine to touch, mine to use however I please. He continued. And I want it bare before this day is over, understand? I will check next time and if it isn't bare as a baby's bum by then, I'll shave it all off myself. And I'll do it with a kunai, not a razor. Do you understand, slave? He demanded, grinding the flat of his hand against the area in question. Why yes, Naruto-sama. She hastily agreed, whimpering in humiliation as she realized that she was leaking all over his hand, which was still cupping her. To whom does this belong? He suddenly asked. To yu, na-en Naruto-sama. She replied in a strained tone of voice. What can I do with it? He demanded. Whatever you want, Naruto-sama. She said. Good slave, Hinata-chan. Here's your reward. He announced and she gasped as she felt one of his fingers sliding into her moist cavern up to the first knuckle. Good slaves are rewarded and bad ones are punished. What sort of slave will you be, Hinata-chan? He asked. Go good slave, master. Hinata whimpered, trying to analyze the weird sensations she was feeling. She'd never done anything like this before, even if she had explored some, she'd only caressed herself on the outside, never inside. The sensations she got from Naruto's inexperienced fumbling were so odd, that she couldn't even categorize them. Did it feel good? Was it uncomfortable? Was it painful? Did it excite her? She didn't know. All she knew was that Naruto was touching her. It was Naruto who was doing this to her. The tip of one of Naruto's fingers was inside of her. I don't like the way you are usually dressed, Hinata-chan. Naruto informed her in the midst of all her confusion. From now on, you'll dress in short skirts and tight tops. Underwear isn't allowed. He instructed her, then recalled that the girl in the book wasn't a nin. Hinata's more active lifestyle was vastly different from the peasant girl in the story. But since this wasn't for real, perhaps that didn't matter. Then again, he was doing this as practice for the real thing with Tsunade and she too was vastly different from the girl in the story. Not to mention, that she had even bigger problems than Hinata. He couldn't go purely from the book, so perhaps it was better to start adapting it to reality starting now. Yeah, probably. When you are training or going on a mission, I will allow you to wear sport bras, vest or a jacket and pants, he improvised. Still no panties however. He amended. Hinata flushed again, wondering if it was happening so often recently that her normally pale complexion might grow darker from all this constant blushing. Yes, master. She agreed. Good girl, Hinata-chan. Naruto approved and she felt herself grow elated. She gasped and then grew weak as she felt something completely unprecedented overtake her, odd sensations rushing through her body and her knees growing weak. Yes, master. Hinata yelped, crumbling forward and leaning against him, only held upright by the jacket around the upper part of her head and her arms. Her knees were too weak to support her, so without the firm body she was leaning against and the pull of her jacket, she'd be on her knees right now. Naruto-sama, she whispered gratefully as he withdrew his finger from within her and used his hand to support her instead. This is great. Naruto suddenly shouted and released his grip on her jacket. She leaned even more heavily against him and slowly brought her arms down, wrapping them around him for support. You're so good, Hinata. I'm a good slave, Hinata whispered hopefully, but Naruto didn't hear her whisper in his excitement. I never knew you were so good at this. He continued undaunted. She must have read that book several times. Lucky. This was excellent practice. I'm glad, she whispered, tears slowly trailing down her cheeks under the cover of her jacket. Naruto was praising her. She was hugging Naruto. They had kissed earlier. He saw her as a woman. He'd claimed her as his. Granted, while she had imagined all of that, she'd never imagined it happening quite like this before. Her, a slave, Naruto, her master. No, never ever had she imagined anything even remotely like this. He'd been so confident, so forceful. She had submitted so easily to him. And it had been wonderful. She had always admired his confidence, his determination and his willpower, but never quite so much as she did at this moment. If it hadn't been for him, would she ever had gathered up the courage to approach him? If it hadn't been for him doing this, would she ever have gotten so far as to even have hugged him like she was now? Well, perhaps not quite as she was now. Never had she imagined herself hugging him with her pants and panties down around her ankles, her bra, undershirt and jacket pushed up, leaving her torso mostly bared while he was still fully dressed. But without him taking her like this, would she ever have gotten as far as to hug him while they both were still fully clothed? Considering how things had been going on for the last couple of years, probably not, she admitted to herself. This was great training, but there's still a lot to do before we're finished. Naruto exclaimed. Yes, Naruto-sama. Hinata agreed. I've done well, but I still need to be trained to become a good slave for master. She thought, blushing again as she realized that she was looking forward to it. Both to the training and to becoming a good slave for her master. Come on, get dressed. I'll treat you to some ramen. Naruto said and Hinata nodded. I'm a good slave, master is rewarding me. Good slave, Hinata. She reasoned as she took a step back and started to pull down her bra, only to recall his earlier instructions about not wearing underwear when not training or going on a mission. She hesitated only for a moment, then unclasped it and removed it entirely, before pulling down her undershirt and jacket. Her eyes instantly locked onto Naruto, who was standing with his back against her, nose pointed in the direction of Konoha and Ichiraku's. She looked down and stepped out of her pants and panties, before putting her pants on and putting her panties in a pocket in her jacket along with her bra. She would be a good slave to master. She didn't have a skirt around, so she hoped he would forgive her for not being able to wear one for him right away. She paled as she suddenly realized that she was wearing her jacket and hurriedly took it off, bundling it up in her arms. The undershirt was tight, her were still hard as solid rock, and without the long jacket covering her up, anyone who saw her would be able to tell that, as she wasn't wearing her bra. Without the long jacket, the tight pants also showed off her shapely. If anyone got close enough, they would be able to tell that she wasn't wearing any panties. She felt horribly embarrassed, but didn't have a choice in the matter. After all, Master had ordered her and she only had to obey him. I'm ready, Naruto-sama, she announced. Great. Come on, all this training has made me hungry. Naruto exclaimed. Though it hadn't been very long since he last ate, he'd been so distracted by the book that he hadn't eaten as much as he usually did. Naruto felt very good about himself and much more confident now. Hinata was a real pal to have helped him with this. He blushed as he recalled the training and touching Hinata like that. He'd never realized that she had just as nice a body as Sakura had. Well, perhaps not just as nice, but she certainly wasn't far off. All that weird-ass gentle fist taijutsu training had given her a finely toned body, and he had to admit that it had felt good touching her like that, even if it had only been for training. Yes, training. He needed a lot of that. He didn't want to mess up something and make Tsunade cry again, like she had when he tried to be a good boyfriend to her before. He didn't know quite where he had messed up, but figured there had been something lacking in his performance that made her disappointed with him. He still didn't know why she had apologized to him, however. Perhaps she thought that she should have taught him to have been a better boyfriend or something. She was older than him, after all. No doubt she'd had boyfriends before and knew how they should act. He'd show her that he could learn that just fine on his own. He vowed that she'd be really impressed the next time he tried to be a good boyfriend to her. Or master, like the book called it. It must mean boyfriend, though. Just as slave must mean girlfriend. Otherwise the characters in the books wouldn't be doing such perverted things with each other. After all, only married couples and girlfriends, boyfriends did those sort of things with each other, didn't they? Hey, Hinata-chan, how about some more training tomorrow? I got a few boring missions, but after that, we could train some if you're free. Naruto asked. Yes, Naruto-sama. I have a few missions as well during the day, but my evening is free. She replied as the two of them went through the gate, slowing down just enough so that the guards would be able to tell who they were. The moment they were through the gate, Naruto increased the pace again, however, salivating around the mouth as he imagined feasting on a few bowls of ramen. He would even keep his word and buy Hinata one, perhaps two. Since the Tsunade mission had been upgraded from C class to A class and the Tsunade retrieval classified as an S class due to the encounter with Orochimaru and Kabuto, he'd received rather hefty paychecks for it, and there was still some left from the Tsunade mission, even if he'd burned most of it on more Ichiraku ramen than he could ordinarily afford. But the gloriously large sum from the Tsunade mission was still unused, so he had more money than usual at the moment. He glanced aside at Hinata as they bounced through the city, nearly stumbling off a roof as he saw her unusual manner of dress. He turned his back towards her as she got dressed, as it seemed wrong for him to keep watching her when they weren't training any longer, so this was the first time he saw what she had done. Wow! He thought as he caught himself and leapt onwards to the next roof. She'd removed her jacket and was carrying it bundled up under her left arm. This in a slight bouncy quality to certain of her attributes, which was obvious now when she wasn't wearing her jacket, allowed him to reach the conclusion that she wasn't wearing a bra. He nearly stumbled again and Hinata managed to get a bit ahead of him. His eyes widened as he realized that he wasn't able to see a panty line through her tights. Wow! He thought again. She's really into this. She's even practicing when we're not training any longer. No wonder she knew the book so well. Hinata is a closet pervert, he realized, shaking his head in bewilderment. That was weird, he'd thought only males were perverts. Well, males and Tsunade. Tsunade was definitively a pervert. His pervert, but a pervert still. He briefly considered berating Hinata for it, but shrugged it off as he realized that this just meant that he'd found a good training partner. Closet pervert that she was, she no doubt knew lots more than he did and would be able to tell him whenever he did something wrong. It also meant that he could tease the shit out of her for it. Lots better, Hinata-chan. I can't wait to see you in a short skirt. Naruto joked, which caused Hinata to stumble herself, just barely being able to prevent herself from falling off the roof she'd just landed on as Naruto spoke up. Why yes, Naruto-sama. She piped up and he chuckled at her perfect response. Yeah, she's really taking this training seriously, he thought. Lucky. It'll be awesome to train with her if she's this gung-ho about it. You don't have to call me Naruto-sama when we're not training. Naruto told her. Not that he really minded, but it would be embarrassing if she did it when somebody could hear it. Naruto-kun or just Naruto will do just fine, he assured her. The two of them reached Ichiraku's in short order and were soon seated at one of the few tables, Naruto with a miso ramen in front of him and Hinata with a veggie ramen. Naruto sat down right next to her, causing her to blush again. They only had a minute or so after the ramen arrived to each other, however, before company arrived. Old man, pork ramen, lots of it. Choji ordered, before he spotted Naruto and Hinata. Hey, guys, oi. The laid-back Chunin of the Nara family greeted them as he followed Choji. Old man, beef ramen, please, he added in the proprietor's direction, before the two of them strolled over and seated themselves at the small table. Hey, Naruto cheerfully greeted them, suppressing the urge to smirk as he saw them start at the sight of Hinata without her jacket. "Whatcha doin'?" he asked them. Choji insisted on doing some training all of a sudden and dragged me over here to replenish our energy once we were done. How troublesome. Shikamaru replied. Cool. Where's the loud blonde Sasuke freak you guys usually hang with? Naruto asked. She wanted to take a shower and get a change of clothes, in case she bumped into my Sasuke-kun. Shikamaru replied, pitching his voice to match Ino's for the last part. What are you guys doing? Choji asked, drumming his fingers impatiently on the table as he waited for his ramen. Same. We trained a bit and then I got hungry. Naruto replied and then slurped up the broth from his nearly empty bowl. Old man, another. He called over at Ichiraku and slammed the bowl down in the center of the table. Trained? You too? Shikamaru asked with a bewildered expression. Why? Sasuke is off somewhere and Sakura is probably trying to hunt him down. Then I bumped into Hinata and asked her to train with me. Naruto replied. Why yes. Hinata piped up with a faint blush on her face. Oh, was all Shikamaru said in response to that. How'd that work for you guys? Choji asked. Great. Hinata is very good, Naruto exclaimed cheerfully. Aren't you, Hinata? Naruto asked, slapping her back, which nearly toppled her over and caused her to dive headfirst into her still nearly full bowl of ramen. Yes. She shyly replied, still blushing. I am a good slave, Hinata mentally praised herself and blushed even deeper. You two trained together. Cool. Good for you, Hinata. Ino exclaimed, having strolled in without being noticed by the other four. Old man, vegetarian ramen. She ordered with a boisterous call, not unlike Naruto's. Yeah, she's the best, I learned lots. Naruto replied as Ino seated herself next to Hinata. Me too. Hinata piped up. Naruto-kun is very good too. A very good master. Oh, Ino replied, somewhat surprised at hearing that. She kinda doubted it was true though. No doubt Hinata was influenced by the overly obvious crush she had on Naruto. Though he had one against Kiba. And even Neji. Come to think of it, perhaps he was better than she'd previously given him credit for. She was even more surprised at Hinata's state of dress, however. She didn't think the shy Hinata had it in her to take off her jacket in public. Come to think of it, it didn't even look as if she was wearing a bra. Oh, how bold. But Naruto, the jackass, probably hasn't even noticed. He only has eyes for big forehead. Hey, he's always watching her. He's on her team, perhaps. Hey, Naruto, do you think we can train sometime too? She asked. It was perfect. She could kindly inform him that he should ask Hinata out on a date and wheedle some of Sakura's weaknesses out of him at the same time. She hadn't expected her to put up as much of a fight in the preliminaries as she had, so getting the lowdown on the current Sakura couldn't hurt in case she had to go up against big forehead girl again. Hinata blushed even deeper and just barely managed to suppress a gasp, while Naruto merely shrugged. Sure thing. Hinata and me are training tomorrow evening again. You could join us, if you want to. He replied flippantly before slurping down some more ramen. He didn't really relish the notion of training with Ino, but he recalled that she had been friends and rivals with Sakura for a long time. Perhaps he could wheedle a few secrets about Sakura out of her, in case Tsunade ever broke up with him. Besides, Ino was a girl too. Perhaps he could even ask her a few things that could help him with this whole boyfriend-girlfriend deal. She was more similar in personality to Tsunade than Hinata, so perhaps she had a better idea of how to handle his Hokage girlfriend. Yeah, that sounded logical. Perhaps it wasn't such a bad idea to train with her after all. Hinata was now beet red and this time, she did gasp, though nobody around the table noticed as they were all either participating in or silently observing the conversation between Naruto and Ino. Is Master displeased with me? Is that why he wants to train with Ino too? Maybe he wants to replace me. Or, perhaps he wants more than one slave. Is that it? She wondered nervously, absently twiddling her thumbs. If he was thinking of replacing her, Hinata wouldn't know what to do. She'd be crushed. That would be even worse than how things had been before. Oh, she hoped that wasn't it. She'd never contemplated sharing him with anyone before. Heck, She hadn't contemplated being his slave either. But now, she was fervently hoping that he, just, wanted to have another slave, not that he wanted to get rid of her. You wanna train with Naruto? Shikamaru asked incredulously, scratching the top of his head in bewilderment. Yeah, I like what I see in Hinata now. If he can do that for her, I can't wait to see what he can do for me. Ino replied, to which Hinata emitted a low, eep, and Naruto to nearly choke on his ramen that Ayame had just placed in front of him. Another closet pervert, Naruto mentally exclaimed as he punched his chest, trying to dislodge the ramen that had gotten stuck in his throat at her unexpected comment. She knows what I did with Hinata. Was she watching? How else can she know? I thought she was talking about regular training at first, he wondered. Or, did she use that weird mind thingy? What I see in Hinata now, she said. She must have looked inside her mind and decided to train like Hinata has. She is another closet pervert. Che, how troublesome. Shikamaru sighed, shaking his head. Hinata did seem more confident than he'd ever seen her. Heck, if someone had told him earlier today that he'd get to see her out of her ever-present jacket, he would have laughed. But Ino certainly wasn't suffering from any confidence problems. He didn't want to know what she would be like if she got even pushier than she already was. Good for you, Ino. Choji encouraged her. One should always try to learn as much as possible from as many people as possible, he sagely added. Look who's talking. You almost never train. All you care about is where your next meal is coming from. Ino snapped. I train. Sometimes. Choji protested weakly. I did today. Yeah, for 20 measly minutes, then you got hungry. Ino retorted. And I had to nag at you two assholes for 2 straight days before you agreed to it, and all I got from you two lazy bastards were 20 bloody minutes worth of training. Naruto was looking between Ino, Shikamaru and Choji with a faintly shocked expression. Wow, I never would have thought, he thought, before shaking his head to dismiss the mental imagery that was starting to form. That was too bloody scary to contemplate. She trained with both Shikamaru and Choji. Then again, she wanted to train with him too, and he was already training with Hinata. He really needed to reread some chapters in the book again. He'd focused on the ones with one guy and one girl as he was practicing with Tsunade in mind. But he distinctly recalled skimming over a few that had multiple people involved. Perhaps that would help him understand what was going on and give him some ideas of how to handle a training session with 2 others involved. This is weird, Naruto mused as he sat with his back against a tree, reading through a book he'd picked up to better understand some of the things written in the book he'd gotten from Kakashi. While it seemed like a fine guide and training with Hinata had went absolutely smashing, some of the concepts he'd come across in the book were just barely explained. So after reading over a couple of the chapters detailing one man with several girlfriends and coming across references to shibari and bondage, without adequate descriptions of how to actually go about using them, he'd picked up some new reading materials on those very subjects. Looks sort of effective, though, he admitted to himself as he looked at the illustrations in the book and went over the instructions once again. But if done wrong, this must be very painful, he remarked with a worried frown. He had planned on practicing this with Hinata, but decided against it. He'd have to practice some first before trying it with a real girl. He had a few training dummies at home, but none of those were really suited for this kind of thing, built more for durability than flexibility. And some of the positions these techniques feature the girlfriend in required flexibility. But how else can I practice this without putting someone in pain? He mused to himself, then blinked in surprise as a notion struck him. That's perfect, he happily exclaimed. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He cried out and a copy of him appeared in a puff of smoke, the 2 Narutos staring excitedly at each other. Waroke no Jutsu. The copy cried out and morphed into a blonde young girl in another puff of smoke. Why didn't I think of this before? The girl exclaimed as the real Naruto went through his backpack, pulling out 2 lengths of rope from inside of it. I don't know, but it is an awesome idea, Naruto announced and grabbed one of the ropes, then picked the book up and looked through the instructions once again. 19 minutes and 4 redone attempts later, Naruto found himself looking down at his female clone in an impressive-looking hog tie that completely restricted her movements. How is it? He asked as he looked her over. It's still a bit tight over my lower back, but it's not too bad, she replied. I think you got it mostly right this time, she reasoned and struggled against the restraints, failing to undo them and nodding in approval. Great. Stick around for a while, let me know if it gets any worse. Naruto instructed and created another copy of himself, which used his jutsu to become a girl as well. Using the second rope, Naruto had that clone tied up as well 14 minutes later, but in a different position than the first clone. How is it? He inquired curiously. I feel odd, she declared hesitantly. The rope around my groin is giving me a wedgie and that knot. Whenever I try to move, the knot moves in. It's making me feel weird. Odd how? Naruto asked. Warm. Hot? She mumbled and shifted her arms around, emitting a faint moan. It's not uncomfortable, in fact. It's rather nice. She stutteringly tried to explain, then shifted again. Good. Even. Very good. She finished. Naruto scratched the back of his head and bent over, looking down at the girl lying on her back, her arms crossed over her chest and with ropes intricately running across her body. This knot? He asked and pressed his finger against a knot located right over that weird slit, the Erkunt as Jiraiya's book called it. Yes. The clone agreed, her eyes opening up wide as Naruto pressed his finger against the knot. Well, it seems from the book that girls like to be touched here. I guess it's the same for you too. He mused out loud. Hinata certainly seemed to dig it. I can see why, the clone moaned as Naruto kept pressing and shifting the knotted rope. Naruto hummed distractedly as he bent down and observed the area in question from up close, still poking and prodding the knot around, which caused the clone to eep, moan and groan faintly in the background. Naruto moved his right index finger from the knot, pushing the rope somewhat to the side, before running his finger over the clone's moist cavern. When I got my finger into Hinata, I had to fumble around some first before I could get it in. Better do some recon. Naruto reasoned out loud and got a positive hum from the clone. This must be it. Naruto reasoned as his finger slipped into his counterpart accompanied by a low groan. Yeah, I sound like Hinata did. Naruto grunted with a rueful shake of his head. Is it really that good? Oh, yes, the clone exclaimed. I've gotta try myself sometime. Naruto reasoned with an intrigued expression as he took a step back and prepared to untie his clone. No, don't stop. It's really good, she insisted. Hinata is due any moment now. I could use the ropes then now when I've got the hang of two of these positions. I could use a real female opinion about them. Naruto protested. I don't care. Get back to what you were doing. The clone ordered. Plus poof plus. Che. How troublesome. Naruto sighed in a very Shikamaru-like manner, as he put the kunai he'd used to get rid of the clone away, before he grabbed the rope and untied the knots, before he put the rope away. You're not going to cause any trouble, are you? Naruto asked of the second clone. Nah, this is too uncomfortable for me to want to stick around, she replied, and when Naruto sent the mental command for the clone to dissolve, she did and vanished in a puff of smoke. He bent down and retrieved that rope as well and was still at work untying the knots he'd made in it when Hinata and surprisingly enough, Ino, showed up. Yo! Ino boisterously proclaimed her presence, while Hinata merely nodded shyly as Naruto looked up at them, blinking in surprise at Ino's presence. Oh, yeah, you wanted to train too. I'd forgotten about that. Naruto grunted as he rolled up the rope and put it away with the other one. Is that any way to greet a friend, you dope? Ino snapped irritably. And how could you have forgotten me, the cutest of the cute and Sasuke-kun's favorite girl in the entire world? Hey, the day Geisuke actually takes note of a girl is the day when I give up ramen forever. Naruto snorted and followed it up with a merry chuckle at his own wit. Don't call Sasuke-kun that. Ino snapped. Meh, whatever. Naruto snorted. How's it hanging, Hinata? Naruto asked, noting with approval that Hinata was already prepared for training. Her jacket was nowhere to be seen, the tight t-shirt she wore revealed that she was braless and she was wearing a skirt, which he'd never seen her in before. I'm good, Naruto-sama. Hinata stuttered nervously. Naruto-sama. Ino mouthed in disbelief, blinked and leaned over towards Hinata. Crushing on somebody is all well and good, Hinata. Even if your taste in guys leaves something to be desired. But isn't Naruto-sama taking it a wee bit too far. She whispered inquisitively but didn't get an answer before Naruto spoke up. Great. Hinata-chan. Naruto approved. So, Ino-chan, how far have you gotten in your training with Shikamaru and Choji? He asked with a curious look directed at Ino. Ugh. Don't even get me started on those two. Ino snorted. Shikamaru lazes about all the time, occasionally whipping out his shadows so he'll be left alone. Choji will occasionally put in a few minutes worth of effort if I nag enough, but will mostly laze around with Shikamaru while eating at the same time, leaving me to train on my own. I see. Naruto mumbled and nodded to himself. Back to basics then, to see where your level is, he decided out loud, mentally discarding the idea of using the ropes on Ino. Besides, he could use the practice. There was no telling how long he'd be together with Tsunade, after all. If they broke up, he'd need to have the basics down pat in order to successfully woo Sakura. Hinata-chan, you observe from the sidelines. Feel free to comment with any corrections or suggestions you may have for improvements either of us can make. Naruto directed and Hinata reluctantly nodded, taking a few steps to the side. All right, Naruto-sama. She piped up. Well, at least Naruto-sama is involving me somewhat, instead of just throwing me aside. Perhaps I'm not entirely useless. Hinata reasoned sadly. Master trusts me to correct even him. I will have to do my best. She figured and resolved to do her very best, cheering up somewhat. Great. What did you have in? Ino started and trailed off as Naruto approached her, swallowing nervously at the extremely unfamiliar stern look on Naruto's face. Mind. She gulped as he stepped right into her personal space, before stopping his imposing approach. So, you think that I'm interested in your worthless hide, Naruto said with a disgusted look on his face. I already have an excellent partner and now you come crawling on your knees, begging me to take you in as well. What? Ino exclaimed with her eyes bulging out in shock. If you want the privilege of being a part of this, you'll have to be very convincing, Ino-chan. So far, I've yet to be convinced. Naruto snorted with a condescending look on his face, contempt oozing from his voice. Ino-chan really should be on her knees for this. Hinata mumbled and Naruto nodded, then suddenly used his right foot as a hook to quickly and deftly pull at the back of Ino's knees, which caused her to slam down onto her knees. Ow. That's smarts. What the hell is you two morons' major mental dysfunction? Ino roared and tried to get back onto her feet, only to be stopped by Naruto putting a hand on her shoulder, holding her down on her knees. Such a disrespectful tone of voice and utterly inappropriate body language. Naruto sighed and shook his head in disappointment. Is that really how you're supposed to behave when you're asking me to take you under my wings, Ino-chan? Naruto inquired with a stern look directed at the kneeling girl. You utter retard. I'd tell you to go your mother, if you had one. What the hell is wrong with you, stupid? Ino roared as her vision slowly turned red from the rising anger. Naruto blinked in surprise. This wasn't at all how it was supposed to go. Was Ino merely ignorant of things or was she improvising? His forehead creased in concentration. He had to admit that Ino was a very different type of girl compared to the girls in Jiraiya's perverted stories. Oh, of course. He thought as realization struck. She's acting differently because she's a more outspoken and determined person. The girls in the multiple girls one guy stories are all so docile, which isn't what Ino is like. She's more like some of the girls in the one girl one guy stories, that has to be broken down first. Great. That's more like Tsunade and Sakura anyways, so this'll be good practice. Okay, so I'll have to improvise somehow. Let's see. You're in need of a serious attitude adjustment, girl. Naruto snorted. Me. I'm in need. Ino growled and trailed off as his wrath nearly caused her to explode in a roaring rage. I'm going to adjust your face, you asshole. Ino snapped as she slapped Naruto's arm away and leapt up to her feet, pulling her right arm and hand back in preparation for the haymaker of the century. She swung her fist around at Naruto's face, but he had no real problem avoiding the furious assault, taking a step back and then instantly moved back into Ino's personal space, pushing her off balance and towards to the ground with a simple one-handed push to her shoulder. Ino grunted in pain as she just barely managed to catch herself with her hands, preventing an even more painful face-to-ground experience. She prepared to push herself up again, when Naruto suddenly grabbed both her wrists and pulled her arms up around her back. Hinata-chan. This little disobedient needs a bit of education to make her realize her place in the grand scheme of things. Get the ropes from my backpack and bring them over here. Naruto ordered. Yes, Naruto-sama. Hinata mumbled deferentially. Hinata, snap out of it, girl. He's insane. Ino exclaimed in shock, but no matter what protestations she made, Hinata returned with the ropes and upon Naruto's order, deftly and efficiently assisted in tying Ino up. Minutes later, Ino found herself with her arms tied behind her back with the rope being looped around her neck, so that if she tried to move her arms overly much, she'd strangle herself with the rope. The second rope had been wrapped around her torso, shoulders, waist and thighs, then strung over a sturdy branch and used to raise her somewhat off the ground, so that she had to stand on the tips of her toes like an upside down L, or have her entire body weight supported only by that rope, which was extremely uncomfortable and somewhat painful, although not overly so. Naruto, I am going to kill you when I get out of this. Ino snarled as she tiptoed forward, making an attempt to get into an upright position instead of the odd horizontal half-lying half-standing position she'd wound up in, only to skid backwards and end up the same way she had started as the rope restrained her from going far enough forward. Like I said, serious need of an attitude adjustment. Wouldn't you say so too, Hinata-chan? Naruto inquired with a smile directed at Hinata. Yes, Naruto-sama. Hinata replied obediently. Hinata, don't let this moron's stupidity contaminate you. He's crazy. Ino snapped. Such disrespect. Naruto sighed and without warning brought his right hand down onto Ino's purple skirt-covered rear posterior with a resounding smack. Ow. What the hell? Ino yelped. 10 strokes sound fair to you, Hinata-chan? Naruto almost absently inquired. She was very disrespectful towards you, Naruto-sama. Hinata stated hesitantly and nervously fiddled with her hands. TWT-20. She weakly suggested. Very good, Hinata-chan. Naruto approved. Hinata-chan, you do the next 10, I'll do the rest. He instructed her and took a step aside, making space for Hinata. Ino-chan, you count the rest of the strokes. If you don't, I won't count them and you'll only make it worse for yourself. What the? Naruto, have you go ow? Ino cried out as Hinata applied the flat of her hand to Ino's butt. Hinata, still on one. You had better count, Ino-chan. Naruto instructed her. You let me go right this instant and I may let you live, you dumb fuao. Ino cried out while Hinata relentlessly brought her hand to bear again. Hinata, when I get out of this, you're so going to get it too. Ino snarled. Ow. 2. For crying out loud, 2. She hastily yelped as Hinata spanked her again. 3. Merciful Kami, for pity's sake. Ow. 4. God damn it. Now you're getting it, Ino-chan. Naruto mumbled and gently stroked her cheek, but she whipped her head away, only to yelp as the sudden movement shifted weight off her feet and onto the ropes. You bastards. Ino sobbed. Ow. 5. She yelped. Hell. 6. Assholes. I'm going to 7. She continued to count as Hinata continued to dole out punishment. Good girl, Ino-chan. Naruto approved and caressed her cheek again. See how much easier you can make it on yourself if you behave properly. He inquired. 8. You asshole. I'm going to rip out your spine. 9. Ino responded, jerking and tugging on her bonds. Ow. 10. For sake. 10. Oh, Kami. Ino sighed, then her eyes widened in panic as Naruto moved out of her point of vision towards her back, making her realize that her ordeal wasn't quite over yet. Oh no. Please don't do this. She requested. Naruto, I'll forget everything if you'll it. You. 11. Good girl, Ino-chan. Naruto approved and gently caressed her rear, before he pulled his hand back and brought it down again, taking his time to caress her between the strokes. Shit. 12. Get your hands off ow. 13. Don't do that. Let go of ow. 14. Stop rubbing you turd. 15. I'll have your hide these. Why the hell are you doing this to me? 17. Ino cried out and tears started streaming down her cheeks. Ow. 18. Ow. 19. Ow. 20. Oh, Kami. 20. Finally. Finally, Ino sobbed. It's all right, Ino-chan. Naruto commented and gestured for Hinata to go to Ino, mouthing, hug, as he gently caressed Ino's rear. Hinata nodded and kneeled down before Ino, wrapping her arms around the blonde girl, cooing softly as she hugged her. It's not all right. You hit me, you bastard. Ino snapped. And you too, Hinata. Let go of me. Untie me, you morons. She ordered. It sounds to me like another attitude adjustment might be in order. What do you think, Hinata-chan? Naruto inquired, but Hinata never had a chance to reply. No need for that. None whatsoever. I'm good. Ino insisted. Is that so? Naruto muttered, still caressing Ino's. Are you ready to be polite? He inquired. Yes. Ino instantly agreed. Will you make a proper request? Yes. Ino replied. You should call him Master, or Naruto-sama. Hinata mumbled her suggestion. No. Ino started. You want another 5? Naruto interrupted her. No. Naruto-sama. Ino exclaimed. Good girls, Ino-chan and Hinata-chan. Naruto approved and released Ino's, which got a sigh of approval from her. He moved around and stepped up behind Hinata, slowly pulling her into an upright position. Have you been a good girl in other ways, Hinata-chan? Naruto inquired, deciding that it was time to pay a bit of attention to Hinata for a while. Jiraiya's books had always been clear on that whenever 2 or more girls were involved, unless one of them was being punished for some reason, the guy paid all the girls involved equal attention. Yes, Naruto-sama. Hinata breathed. Are you wearing any of the forbidden items? Naruto asked her as he slowly rubbed her waist. No, Naruto-sama. Hinata assured him and shook her head in denial. Well, why don't you show Ino-chan what a good girl you are, Hinata-chan? Naruto suggested, and Hinata instantly turned beet red as her hand slowly crept down to the edge of her short skirt, which she gripped so hard that her fingers turned white. Slowly, ever so slowly, her arms, hands and fingers trembling like mad, she pulled the skirt up and revealed her freshly shaven groin to Ino, whose eyes bulged in surprise. Hinata. Good grief. What the? She exclaimed and fell silent as Naruto's hands moved down to Hinata's hips and thighs, gently caressing them. Seems like you've indeed been a good girl, Hinata-chan. Naruto approved as he failed to locate any panties, then moved his left hand upwards and into her t-shirt, gently rubbing her flat stomach for a few moments, before it went even higher. Naruto blushed himself as he ran his hand over Hinata's bare, but Hinata had her back against him with the Byakugan inactive and Ino was too busy staring at Hinata and what Naruto was doing to her to notice it. A very good girl, he murmured and ran his thumb over Hinata's right. Naruto, why you pervert? Ino breathed, but Naruto was too intent on Hinata to take note of what she was saying and Hinata was too intent on what Naruto was doing to her to care. Hinata let out a lust-filled moan as Naruto captured Hinata's left between his thumb and index finger, caressing it as it slowly grew between his fingers at his gentle ministrations. He kissed the back of Hinata's neck as his right hand moved towards the left, until he was cupping the pale-eyed girl, slowly rubbing his hand up and down across her most intimate area. You've been a very good girl, Hinata-chan. This is your reward. Naruto breathed against Hinata's neck, before he kissed it again as his right index finger slipped into the Hyuga Eris as his left hand moved back to her right. Master. Hinata squeaked and slumped back against Naruto's chest, her knees feeling weak and her legs unsteady. Master. She approved in a low groan as he slowly slid his finger in and out of her, as his left hand cupped her and tweaked her. Why you two are crazy? Ino whispered. Complete bonkers. Out of your minds, she said in a strained tone of voice, her gaze locked onto Naruto's finger working itself in and out of Hinata with slow and gentle motions that was obviously highly pleasing to her severely mentally disturbed Naruto-hooked friend. Ino just couldn't believe what she was seeing, had never in her wildest imagination thought that Hinata of all people had gone further with a guy than she had. Even if it was a very much more perverted, further, than Ino had ever imagined herself going with a guy. She wouldn't even let Sasuke treat her like Naruto was treating Hinata and Ino herself. Well, perhaps if he asked nicely or something. But certainly not otherwise. And it was Naruto who was doing this with Hinata. Naruto. If someone had asked her earlier today if there had been a guy in her age who had the guts to do something like this, she would have laughed in their faces. And seeing it like this, right in front of her, it was mind-boggling. She yanked at her restraints and gurgled as the rope around her neck reminded her of just why that was such a bad idea. She relaxed and took a deep breath of air as the rope eased up around her neck, her forehead creasing as a heady musky scent which she had no doubt where it came from penetrated her conscience. Oh, gross. Hinata really reeks. Ino mentally exclaimed and shook her head. I may just throw up. Master. Hinata cried out as a wave of particularly pleasing sensations came upon her. Yes, I am your master, Hinata-chan. My word is your command. Obedience is pleasure. Refusing to obey is pain. Repeat it. Naruto breathed as he ran his thumb over her engorged. You're my master, Naruto-sama. Your word is my command. Obedience is pleasure. Refusing to obey is pain. Hinata moaned. You'll always obey me, Hinata-chan, won't you? Naruto asked and kissed the side of her neck. Always, Naruto-sama. I'll always obey you. Forever and ever. Hinata confirmed. Come for me, Hinata-chan. Come for me. Come for me now. Naruto slowly ordered her and at the end of it, cautiously bit down on her right earlobe hard enough for it to feel somewhat uncomfortable, but not hard enough to be really painful. I will come for you, Naruto-sama. Hinata assured him. Come for me. Naruto repeated straight into her ear. I'll come for you, master. Only for you. Hinata responded. Come now. Naruto ordered and tweaked her, ran his thumb over her, slipped a second finger into her and bit down on her ear again, all at the same time. Yes. Naruto-sama. Yes. Hinata cried out and then came like a runaway train, trembling and shuddering against his muscled chest. Hell, Hinata, Ino said in a strained tone of voice, as Hinata slowly eased down from the peak of ecstasy. Thank your master for your reward, Hinata-chan. Naruto murmured after Hinata had been given a minute to recover somewhat. Thank you, master. Thank you ever so much, master. I'm yours, forever yours. I'll come always for you. Obedience is pleasure. Refusing to obey is pain. Hinata mumbled with a glazed look in her eyes and a vapid faraway expression on her face. I love you, master. I love you. She repeated in a somewhat stronger voice, more sure than ever of that simple truth. Naruto wrapped his arms around her and held her against her, until her legs had regained their strength and she was once again capable of standing upright on her own. He turned the girl around and captured her lips, which made her heart sing and made her day, even more so than the orgasm he'd just given her. She moaned against him and felt herself growing even more soaked than she had been before, her level of arousal reaching new heights in mere seconds. Master is kissing me. Master is kissing me. Master is kissing me. She mentally chanted and whimpered as he pulled back. Holy shit. Ino croaked and swallowed nervously. Clean my fingers. Naruto said and thrust his fingers at Ino, who yelped in shock and jerked in her bonds, accidentally cutting off her own air supply again. What? Ino howled in outrage. Forget it, you utter mo, she started, but was cut off. Do you want another 20, Ino-chan? Naruto asked, which shut the girl up and made her face pale. You can't really expect me to. Ino started but trailed off, looking up at Naruto with an incredulous expression on her face. Clean them, Ino-chan. Naruto sternly ordered and pressed his fingers against her lips, making the musky scent of Hinata even more prevalent than before. She stared down at his glistening fingers, covered with Hinata juices, and then back up at Naruto with a defiant expression. I wouldn't do that even if Sasuke asked me to on his bare knees, and I certainly won't do it for you. Ino snarled and turned her head away. If you put those dirty fingers anywhere near me again, I'll bite them off. Ino swore, then yelped as Naruto grabbed her cheeks and pulled her up towards his face, raising her toes off the ground and putting all of her weight on the rope and her head between his fingers. I like a little spirit in my girls, but you're taking it a bit too far, Ino-chan. Naruto cautioned her, then captured her lips for a few seconds, before he dropped her and let her swing back as Ino simply gaped in astonishment. My F first kiss. Ino exclaimed in stunned shock. You took my first kiss. She snapped up at him as she swung back and forth, her toes dragging on the ground as she tried to stop herself. You're first, I'll be taking a lot of those, Ino-chan. Naruto informed her and put a hand on his lower back, stopping her pendulum motion and also pressing her body down against the ropes that held her up, causing her to whimper a bit before he eased up with the downwards pressure. We've got all evening and all night, Ino-chan. You will break and submit to me as is proper, sooner or later. Like hell I will. Ino snapped, then paled as she felt Naruto flipping her purple skirt up. What or why you doing? Ino demanded to know, then gasped as she felt him take hold of her panties and pull them down. Naruto. Stop that, pervert. You pervert. Hinata-chan. Keep track of every time she curses, every time she disobeys me, every time she fails to repeat a line and every time she fails to refer to me as either Naruto-sama or master. She'll get 1 stroke for every offense from now on. Naruto ordered. Yes, Naruto-sama. Hinata instantly agreed and turned her full attention towards Ino. You see, Ino-chan. While your desire to join me and Hinata is commendable, your attitude is not. So, I'm going to do something about that. Naruto informed her and bent down in front of her face, grinning at her. Now, repeat after me, Ino-chan. Naruto-sama is my lord and master. Are you completely out of your mind, you dim-witted dipshit? Ino snarled. That's 4. Hinata spoke up. What? Ino demanded to know. 1 stroke for, 1 for, dim-witted, 1 for, dipshit, and 1 for not repeating that line. Hinata mumbled. See, Ino-chan, not doing as I say, will make it very uncomfortable for you. Now, repeat after me. Obedience is pleasure. Refusing to obey is pain. Naruto calmly informed the suspended and restrained girl who glared at him in silence for nearly a full minute. Obedience is pleasure. Refusing to obey is pain. Ino got out between clenched teeth. Good girl, Ino-chan. Naruto approved and reached out to gently caress her left through her purple dress for a few moments. Naruto-sama is my lord and master. Repeat. Naruto-sama is my lord and master. Ino parroted, flinching as he reached out and caressed her right for a few seconds. This is one crappy evening. Ino mentally howled and resolved to skin Naruto alive once she got out of these ropes. 30 minutes later, Naruto gave her a break from repeating lines and having her caressed, only to dole out the punishment she'd earned up until that point. Hinata was once again hugging her as Naruto gave her the 14 strokes she had earned up until that point. She earned 7 more during her spanking, but he informed her that they'd deal with that later on. She was once again back to repeating those silly lines for another half an hour, only this time Naruto wasn't the one rewarding her. Hinata was. Every time she repeated a line correctly, Naruto had ordered Hinata to give Ino's a few gentle rubs and caresses. After that, she got the 11 strokes she had earned herself, then it was back to stupid lines again, with Hinata caressing her most intimate of regions at the same time as Naruto worked on her. Ino soon lost track of time as she went between pain and pleasure, never noticing that the painful session stopped after a while and it was all pleasure, as she kept on swearing eternal obedience to Naruto. The lines he had her repeating turned less and less silly. Her body soon ached for his and Hinata's attention. At first, she had been utterly disgusted by being felt up by another girl, but she'd grown used to it. Being fondled by Naruto had been only somewhat better, but the two had grown on her as the session went on. Now, her repeated lines were preceded and finished with pleas for them to finish her off, to finally let her come. Her were straining against the material of her dress as she desperately tried to make contact with Naruto's hands, her hips were twitching like mad trying to find Hinata's hands and tears of frustration were streaming down her cheeks. Kiss your master, Ino-chan. Naruto suddenly ordered her. Kiss my master. Ino automatically repeated by force of habit, before she blinked and closed the minute distance between her and Naruto's lips by straining her neck as far as it could. Naruto gave Hinata both thumbs up and then moved both his hands to Ino's, resuming the fondling and caressing, never stopping as Ino ravaged his lips with an enthusiasm not even Hinata had displayed so far. Hinata reluctantly followed her master's unspoken command and went back to pleasuring Ino, sinking 2 slender fingers into the girl's soaking wet channel while the fingers of her other hand gently poked, tweaked and caressed Ino on the outside, devoting an increasing amount of attention to her until Ino finally exploded in a long-awaited and extremely powerful climax. Ino screamed her unbridled pleasure into Naruto's mouth, twitching and jerking in her restraints as her most powerful orgasm to date surged through her petite body like a force of nature, until she collapsed and lost consciousness, hanging suspended listless from the tree, as her lips slipped off Naruto. Naruto let out a tired sigh and seated himself on the ground, leaning against the tree Ino was suspended from. He took a deep breath as he looked up at the sky for a few moments as he gathered his thoughts, then he looked over at Hinata and offered her a grateful smile. Come here, Hinata-chan. He told her and patted his lap. Hinata slowly moved over and seated herself sideways onto his lap. You've been a very good girl, Hinata-chan. He informed her and took her moist fingers into his mouth, suckling and licking them one by one, enjoying the slightly tangy flavoring they had now. She panted heavily and stared with wide eyes as he claimed her fingers, one by one. Spread your legs, he ordered as her pinky finger slipped from his mouth and she instantly obeyed. Naruto slowly shifted her around until her back was resting against his chest, her legs splayed to each side of his own legs. He reached around the girl on his lap and pulled her t-shirt up over her, bearing them to the somewhat chilly evening air. He reached down and rolled her skirt up around her waist, making her completely available to him. A very good girl is what you've been today, Hinata. My good girl. He informed her and then grabbed both her. Whose are these? He inquired. Yours, master. Hinata confirmed and he rewarded her with half a minute's worth of gentle caresses. Whose lips are these? Naruto asked as his left hand grasped her cheeks and his right index finger moved across her lips, as he slowly turned her head around until it was facing his, leaning forward over her right shoulder. Yours, master. Hinata replied and Naruto captured her lips with his own in a gentle kiss. Whose is this? Naruto asked after he'd pulled back and moved his right hand down to the area in question. Yours, master. Hinata assured him and his response was to exert his ownership over just mentioned until Hinata came with a muted cry as she attempted to restrain her own reaction to his ministrations. It was a slow, gentle and small climax, unlike the earlier fast, rough and explosive one, but she treasured it just as highly, as it was a precious gift from her Naruto-sama. I love you, Naruto-sama. Hinata restated once she had recovered, finding that Naruto had slowly eased her down from her climax and then wrapped his arms around her in a comforting hug. Naruto hesitated for a few moments. Growing up like he had, being told that he was loved felt like the most precious of gifts, and even if it was only training, he couldn't help but respond to it this time. When she'd said it before, he'd felt like his heart was about to burst, until he realized it was all fake. But now, he just couldn't help himself. I love you too, Hinata-chan. He quietly replied, but Hinata's ears, well attuned to Naruto, instantly picked up on it and the shocked girl fainted in his arms, slumping bonelessly against him. Quote. Ino groaned as she returned to consciousness, slowly opening her eyes and taking note of her surroundings. Surroundings which somewhat surprised her, as she was back in her bed and tucked in beneath the covers. A dream, she muttered to herself and let out a relieved sigh, shaking her head in dismay and bemusement. Granted, it wasn't the first naughty dream she'd ever had, heck, it wasn't even the first one in which Naruto had been involved. Naruto and Hinata together was a first, however. A very disturbing one, truth be told. The spanking was another. Being tied up came from completely out of the blue. Having to repeat lines, being punished for disobedience and having a girl messing with her private parts were also completely brand spanking new elements to her erotic dreams. Though it had been somewhat hot, in spite of these new and distasteful elements, she reluctantly admitted to herself. She yawned, stretched and shifted in preparation for getting up, when she suddenly flinched and her eyes widened. Ow! She cried out and threw the covers off, staring down at herself. Why the am I sleeping in the? She wondered and gingerly got out of bed, starting to sweat, fret and worry as the sudden pain in her rear end that had caused her earlier outcry didn't prove to be just her imagination. She moved over to the full-length mirror next to the door to her room, turned around and stared in shock at her own still somewhat red and quite clearly recently abused butt. Holy shit, she mumbled to herself, then stared down at her wrists, eyes widening further as she saw faint rope burns on them. She breathed in rapid gasps as she almost staggered over to her bed, upon which she sat down with a pained wince. Holy shit, she repeated in shock, staring at her wrists. It happened. It really happened, she said in a tone of complete wonder. Her fist suddenly clenched and she let out a feral snarl. Those two are so dead, she growled as a series of very satisfying mental images popped into her head. The one where she flayed Naruto's skin off with a thorn bush after having shoved a bamboo pole up Hinata's was her personal favorite. It was a very angry and extremely irate Ino who slipped into her robe and stalked off towards the bath, plotting revenge and wondering if there was some sort of jutsu she could learn that would allow her to resurrect the dead. If there was, she would make killing Naruto and Hinata in as painful ways as possible, only to resurrect them and start all over again, her life's work. She was so furious that she never even took note of the fact that after she had taken her bath and shaved her legs, she also shaved her most private of areas, while mumbling, "I have to keep myself nice and bare for master," to herself over and over again. Nor did she take note of the fact that she left her brassiere in the drawer, alongside with her panties, before she slipped into her purple dress and headed downstairs for some breakfast, wondering how she'd gotten back home after she passed out yesterday. Had she been more focused on the present, she might have noticed that she was muttering, "I must not wear a bra, except during training. I will never wear panties unless ordered to herself as she got dressed. Tsunade-sama. Tsunade-sama. Suna-o. Hello, Naruto-kun. Hello, Shizune-nichan." Naruto greeted the older woman as he walked away from Ichiraku's and spotted her stalking the streets of Konoha with a determined expression and a piercing gaze. "What are you doing?" he curiously asked. Tsunade-sama ditched work and snuck off. She sighed with a rueful shake of her head. "I found an empty sake bottle on her desk, so I'm guessing she's trying to get more somewhere." "That's Tsunade-chan, all right." Naruto sighed. His oddball girlfriend could drink more than anyone else he knew, as he'd learned well after traveling with her to Konoha. She had drunk herself into oblivion every single night after the fight with Orochimaru, Kabuto and Manda. "I'll help you look," he offered and resolved to have a talk with her about the dangers of drinking too much. "Thank you, Naruto-kun," Shizune said with a bright smile as the two set off, watching the streets and peeking into every place in the village that served or otherwise sold sake. "So, how's it going between the two of you?" Shizune asked a few minutes after they had started looking for Tsunade together. "I must have messed up a little bit, because I made her cry somehow. I don't really know what I did wrong," Naruto admitted after a few moments of consideration. "I never knew how hard it was to have a girlfriend," he continued with a shake of his head. "But I'm practicing with Hinata-chan and Ino-chan is helping me out too, so I'm learning lots about it now. I'm going to be the best boyfriend ever," he declared with a wide grin. "That's good, Naruto-kun," Shizune commented after a few moments. If she hadn't been angry with Tsunade at the moment, she'd probably have slapped the back of his head for making her cry. But with Tsunade skipping work and heading out for sake, without telling her, Shizune felt a little like making Tsunade cry herself. "You'll have to apologize to Tsunade-sama, however." "Yeah, that's for the best, I guess," Naruto said with a sigh. "Damn straight, Naruto-kun. Apologizing when you've done something wrong is very important. Perhaps give her a gift as well, to show her how much you care. She's not much for flowers, but chocolate will work with her. She's usually not much for jewelry, but perhaps a necklace to replace the one she lost to you wouldn't be such a bad idea." Shizune hinted, then blinked. "Wait a minute, what was that you said before about those other two girls? Hinata-chan and Ino-chan. They're helping me practice to be a good boyfriend. Hinata-chan is a bit shy and not like Tsunade-chan at all, but Ino-chan is very Tsunade-chan-like, so practicing with her is great. Even if she doesn't have as large as Tsunade-chan or is as old, her personality is still very Tsunade-ish." Naruto replied. "Hinata-chan and Ino-chan." Shizune repeated and thought back on all the paperwork she'd gone through lately, all the personnel files she'd read since Tsunade was appointed Hokage. "Hyuga Hinata and Yamanaka Ino?" she inquired as two girls came to mind from what she'd read. "Yep. Ino-chan is perfect for this kind of training. I gotta find some better ropes, though. She nearly tore the ones I had off. Besides, the ropes bruised her a bit too." Naruto replied. Why yo you do that sort of thing with Hyuga-kun and Yamanaka-kun too?" Shizune stuttered in shock. Yeah, it was very lucky that those two wanted to train with me. Naruto replied with a pleased grin. I'll say. Shizune mumbled as she stared in Naruto in complete shock. Tsunade-sama and two other girls. Naruto-kun is a pervert. She thought and shook her head to clear it off the mental images that was going through her mind now. Hey, that place has copies of Ero Sennin's other books. Naruto exclaimed, captured Shizune's right hand with his left and promptly dragged her off towards a display window behind which could be found, amongst other things, the entire Come series. Shizune blushed furiously, both at the naughty books and some of the other things in the window. She'd read part of one of those books a couple of years ago. She didn't know why Tsunade-sama had been carrying one of those filthy things around, but hadn't been able to do more than skim through a couple of pages before she'd put it back in Tsunade's pack, where she had found it. C-C come on, Naruto-kun. Let's continue looking for Tsunade-sama. Shizune urged her younger companion, not wanting to be seen holding hands and standing outside an adult shop with Tsunade's boyfriend. Just a moment, I'm going to buy the rest of those books. Perhaps there's something in there I could use with Tsunade-chan, Hinata-chan or Ino-chan. Naruto replied and Shizune blushed even more furiously as Naruto dragged her into the store accompanied by Shizune's stuttering attempts get out an understandable protest. Her eyes were wide as saucers, her gaze darting to and fro as Naruto pulled her through the store until he found a shelf with books. Naruto quickly found the books he was missing from the Come series and removed them from the shelf, while Shizune had moved up so they stood back to back, sweating and shivering as her gaze roamed about the store and the plethora of perverted items therein. She wasn't even consciously aware of the back-to-back thing, she'd just done it as she felt rather defensive at the moment, her body just on the edge of deciding whether fight or flight would be the proper course of action. Na Naruto-kun, she stuttered. Yeah, Shizune-nichan, Naruto asked. Look. She exclaimed and pointed over at the shelf across the aisle. Naruto turned around and looked in the direction she pointed, until his eyes came to rest upon a set of padded handcuffs. What about them? Naruto asked, looking back at Shizune. You like those kind of things? He asked in bewilderment. No, Shizune fervently denied, her blush turning even more pronounced than moments earlier. I instead of RR ropes. Yamanaka's R rope burns in S stuff. She blurted out and Naruto looked back at the cuffs, moving over to have a closer look at them. He picked them up and turned them around, looking at them from all angles. Here, hold these. He instructed and handed the books over to Shizune, who blushed even more as she saw the cover of the book on top of the small pile, featuring a leering man wearing only briefs chasing down a bikini-clad woman with very generous attributes and long blonde hair, both of them looking suspiciously similar to Tsunade and Jiraiya. Naruto experimentally pulled and yanked on the cuffs, before he nodded in apparent satisfaction. Hey, these are pretty good. He approved and examined the padding more carefully, before he nodded again and put them down on top of the pile of books Shizune was carrying. Come on, perhaps there's more useful stuff in here. He announced happily and walked down the aisle, looking more closely at the items he had ignored at first in his search for books. When they left the store 15 minutes later, Shizune was still blushing furiously and had a shell-shocked expression, having encountered more depravity during the last 15 minutes than she had in her entire life up until this point. And that was saying something, considering how many lewd suggestions and invites Tsunade had gotten over the years they had been traveling together. Naruto saying things like, "This will be perfect for Ino-chan." Or, "This looks like something right up Tsunade-chan's alley." In his loud and boisterous voice, attracting the attention of everybody in the store, had not exactly helped her blush any either. Naruto-kun, not that I mind helping you but. Shizune started, intending to wrap up that sentence with, "If you ever drag me into a store like this ever again, I will kill you." Slowly and painfully. But she was interrupted. You don't. Naruto exclaimed happily, turning to face her with a pleased expression on his face. That's great. Ino-chan is very Tsunade-ish, but much younger. It'd be great to have a more experienced girl helping me out. Besides, you're her best friend. Your help could be invaluable. He continued and wrapped his left arm around Shizune's shoulders, pulling her down against him and planting an affectionate kiss upon her right cheek. Thanks, Shizune Nichan. www. Shizune stuttered, her blush turning even more worse, causing the people who spotted her to wonder if she was truly blushing or if she'd been poisoned by some weird complexion-affecting toxin. Yeah, I wonder why I didn't think of that in the first place. Naruto mused out loud. Who knows Tsunade-chan better than you? With you to train with, I can't lose. I'll be the best boyfriend Tsunade ever had. Naruto continued and Shizune let out a strangled gasp. Thanks again, Shizune Nichan. You're the best. He finished and patted her shoulder before he retracted his arm. Shizune mewed pitifully, incapable of human speech from the shock she was currently suffering from. Come on, let's continue searching for Tsunade-chan. I can't wait to show her all this cool stuff. Naruto urged the older woman on and Shizune followed him in a stunned daze, never even noticing that Naruto had grabbed her hand again to pull her along. The village rumor mill had a field day, after several villagers had seen the Hokage's personal assistant staggering about from bar to gambling den, hand in hand with Naruto who was holding 2 bags from the Fumika Adult Emporium, the two of them looking for Tsunade. Coupled with the earlier rumors about Naruto and Tsunade's relationship, as well as their deviant practices, all the wrong sorts of conclusions were drawn. Especially after Naruto had collided with a drunk and the contents of his bags had been spilled out, revealing everything from dirty books and padded cuffs to phallic-looking gags and shiny clamps. It didn't take long at all for the rumors of Naruto being involved in a kinky threesome relationship with both the young-looking Hokage and her mousy assistant to spread through nearly the entire adult population of Konoha. Naruto. Enko mumbled with a shell-shocked expression. The Kyuubi brat, she asked for clarification. Apparently. Asuma grunted with a bewildered shake of his head. Both of them. At the same time, Enko asked. So I've heard. Kurenai agreed. Holy flying. Enko breathed. I wouldn't have thought that about that little brat. He seemed like such a timid mousy little thing when I threw a kunai at him during the Chunin exam. Tsunade confirmed it. She's his girlfriend. Kakashi spoke up, then blushed faintly as he recalled the scene he'd seen in the Hokage's office. She couldn't even wait until I was out of the room before jumping him, he added. He's good enough to make Tsunade Haim lose herself like that. That, I did not expect. Ibiki commented. Well, he is the #1 most surprising ninja I've ever encountered. Kakashi commented and rolled his one visible eye. I've come to expect the unexpected from Naruto. But, both of them. Enko just couldn't get over that one. That's what I heard. They were cruising bars packing a shitload of toys, looking for Tsunade. Kurenai agreed. I did see Naruto dragging a blushing Shizune around when I was roof hopping on my way to lunch and he was holding 2 large bags at the time. Kurenai revealed. But, both of them. Enko repeated, a faint trickle of drool starting to appear at the corner of her mouth. He's even more of a man than I first thought. Kakashi commented with a proud, almost fatherly, expression on what little of his face was visible. Gimme a drink. Inuzuka Hana exclaimed as she staggered into the bar, stalked up to the bartender and slammed both palms down onto the counter. Now, she snapped. Rough day? Kurenai asked sympathetically. I just got back from my mission, tracking down a band of robbers and getting a necklace back. I was still feeding chakra to enhance my sense of smell, when I bumped into a pedophile and her victim. She was so aroused that I hadn't needed enhanced smell to pick her scent up from a mile away. Hannah ranted and accepted her usual poison of choice from the bartender, tossing it back in one gulp. Another. She gasped out as she put the glass down. Kid wore a protector, however. So I couldn't even beat her up and turn her in for child abuse, because he counts as an adult in the eyes of the laws. Hannah added and accepted her second drink, tossing that back in one go as well. Anybody you recognized? Kurenai asked. Not really. Her scent was somewhat familiar, something I recognized from a long time ago. I must have met her when I was younger, smelled her during a mission or something. I know that I've smelled the kid around before. I think he hangs with Kiba or something, but I've never seen him. Hannah replied and her forehead scrounged up for a few moments. Kiba reeked of him after the Chunin preliminaries. Are you sure? Kurenai asked. Positive. I couldn't possibly forget seeing someone wearing that much orange. She snorted and nodded for the bartender to refill her glass again. Orange. Kurenai gasped. Blonde spiky hair. Whisker marks on his cheeks. Kakashi interjected. Did the woman have short black hair? Wore black clothes? Asuma inquired. Yep. Yep and yep. You know them? Hana asked. That's Naruto and Shizune. Asuma exclaimed. Who are they? Hana asked with a confused expression. Shizune is our new Hokage's personal assistant and Naruto is on my Genin team. Kakashi answered. That tramp works for the new Hokage. I'm going to report her and have her fired. She even had the kid carrying 2 full bags from Fumika's while they were walking around, shouting for tsunami or some such. Hana snarled. Well, I guess it's true, then. Asuma said with a shell-shocked expression. He really is doing both of them. Anko breathed, absently wiping a bit of drool off her cheek. What? Hana asked, taking a sip from a fresh drink that had just been placed in front of her. Naruto is apparently, involved. With both Shizune and our new Hokage, Tsunade Hime. Kurenai explained, causing Hana to spray the other shinobis with the drink she had been drinking from. Ha, what? Tsunade Hime, the Sannin. She's the new Hokage, and that brat is doing both her and her assistant. Hana exclaimed. Wait, Tsunade-sama is what? 50, 60, and she's robbing cradles. Well, Kurenai mumbled and looked away, unable to meet Hana's outraged gaze. While she wasn't quite as much of a Tsunade freak as say Tenten, she still held the woman in great esteem, and the fact that she couldn't refute Hana's incredulous statement made her feel somewhat odd and ashamed for some reason she couldn't quite explain. Not even to herself. It's not like it's illegal, you know. The kid turned adult the moment he passed his Genin exam. Anko commented. 2 bags from Fumika's, you say? My, oh my, she drawled and licked her lips. I may have misjudged him. Get your mind out of the gutter, Snake-chan. Hana snapped, using one of the more derogative little nicknames Anko had picked up after Orochimaru betrayed Konoha and she got to suffer by association, as his one-time apprentice. Out of the gutter and into his pants. Anko mumbled with a distracted look, spotting a familiar face across the room. A toast to Naruto, a man amongst men. Kakashi suggested and raised his glass towards Asuma and Ibiki, who nodded and raised their own glasses. A man amongst men. They agreed and the 3 men clinked their glasses together, as Anko left a few bills on the counter and hastily made her way across the room. Found ya, Tsunade-chan. Naruto exclaimed and Tsunade choked on her drink, coughing and spluttering as she reached for a paper napkin. Tsunade-sama. Shizune snapped and stared the older woman down. What are you 2 doing here? Tsunade moaned and looked longingly at her half-finished drink. It's time for you to pay up and get back to work. You've played hooky for long enough, Tsunade-sama. Shizune sternly admonished her. But I don't wanna. They're trying to bury me in paperwork. Tsunade complained. Evil bastards, she muttered and took a gulp from her drink. No, I don't wanna go back. She complained and hovered protectively over her drink as Shizune tried to take it away from her. Tsunade-sama. Shizune sighed and shook her head. So don't. Naruto replied with a shrug. Make a couple of shadow clones and have them deal with it, Tsunade-chan. He suggested, causing Tsunade's head to whip up and her gaze to instantly settle on him. What? She exclaimed. Shadow clone yourself and have them take care of the paperwork. Naruto explained and was met with silence for nearly a full minute. That's brilliant, Tsunade exclaimed in mock joy. Had I actually known how to? She continued and stared glumly down at her drink, letting out a disappointed sigh. Do you know any others? Naruto asked. Water and mud clones. She sighed and then blinked. Hey, those'll work just as well. She drunkenly explained and her entire expression lit up. You're a genius, Naruto-kun. She said, stood up and pulled him into a hug. How can I ever repay you? She asked as she pulled back, looking down at him. How about going on a date with me, as an apology for making you cry? Naruto suggested, having received a few helpful hints from Shizune as they searched for Tsunade. My place, at 7. I'll cook, do all the work and everything. He continued, Shizune believing that their relationship was a lot further along than it was and that it would thus be more convenient if they were at his place. Besides, that way there wouldn't be quite so many stairs. While there was nothing illegal about their relationship strictly according to law, it would still be frowned upon. Date. Your place. Tsunade responded hesitantly, taking a step back away from Naruto. Yeah, Shizune Nichan suggested it. Naruto replied and Tsunade turned a surprised expression in the direction of her younger assistant. So, how about it, Tsunade-chan? Naruto asked. Tsunade hesitated, somewhat torn over what to do. On the one hand, there was that voice in the back of her head that kept on trying to drive home the fact that Naruto was way too young for her to even dream of considering him as anything but a younger subordinate. On the other, ever since he snuck into her bedroom, she'd been having these near-constant vivid images running through her mind of the two of them together. She was way past the stage when she could deny the fact that she was attracted to him. Way past it. She had at least half a dozen fantasies an hour involving the two of them. This morning, she'd woken up in the midst of a climax with her right hand down her panties as the result of a very satisfying wet dream featuring Naruto and her doing the nasty. She'd been so riled up that she had continued playing with herself and brought herself to a second climax. He was constantly on her mind now, constantly. She could blink and shudder in part excitement and part revulsion in the midst of reading a mission report, as her filthy dirty perverted mind dredged up some sordid fantasy. So while she did want to spend time with the guy she was currently extremely attracted to, she was also extremely reluctant to do so. She stalled, trying to make a decision. I think it's an excellent idea, Tsunade-sama. Shizune spoke up. You should give Naruto-kun a chance, she suggested, feeling that he at least deserved an opportunity to apologize and make up with her. You think? Tsunade asked hesitantly. Sure. Shizune replied with a friendly smile. Hey, you'll even get a free home-cooked meal out of it, she reminded the older woman. The two of them had lived on the road for quite a few years now and they were still staying at a hotel. Shizune was looking for an apartment, as she wasn't feeling quite up to moving in with any of what little remained of her family again. Tsunade was waiting for the crew of workers she had hired to finish fixing up, repairing and cleaning her old home, so she too was staying at a hotel. Home-cooked meals had been few and far between in recent years and would still be for a while, from the look of things. All right, Tsunade said and swallowed nervously as she turned to face Naruto. Fine. Your place at 7, then, she agreed. Great. See you then, Tsunade-chan. Naruto approved and leaned over, pulling her face down so he could place a kiss on her surprised lips. And thanks, Shizune Nichan. Naruto said, pulling her face to his so that he could place a kiss on her once again blushing cheek. See ya. He finished as he spun around and walked out of the bar, swinging the 2 paper bags and attracting Tsunade's attention towards them. Fumika's Adult Emporium, she mumbled to herself as she read off the side of the bags and her eyes suddenly widened in shock. She spun around to face Shizune again, who was blushing and looking at the ground after having been kissed by Naruto. Again, you think it's an excellent idea? She exclaimed in shock. Why, yes, Shizune replied with a surprised tone of voice, looking up at her mentor with a befuddled expression on her face. What's the matter with that? She asked in utter bafflement. He is your boyfriend, after all. Don't you think it's the least you could do for him? She said as if that explained it all. Granted, she didn't quite know what Naruto had done to make Tsunade cry as even he didn't know, but at the very least he deserved a chance to explain himself and apologize for whatever it was he had done. She's gone bonkers. Tsunade instantly decided, wondering if she should perhaps force the younger girl to take a week or 2 off to rest up. Then again, I'm not sure I'm playing with a full deck either. You're more perverted than I thought, Shizune. Tsunade commented, which caused the younger woman's blush to return and intensify. Tsunade shook her head and threw a few bills onto the counter. Well, time to get back to the office, make some clones and put them to work. Tsunade said and rubbed her hands together. While she wasn't quite as sure as Shizune that going to Naruto's for the evening was a good idea, considering that the last time the two of them had met she'd wound up restrained and spanked on her own bed, she did owe him for his idea to have clones do her work for her. But on the other hand, she was weak and she was very tempted to agree to some things she really shouldn't agree to. At all, ever. You're coming along tonight, by the way. Tsunade informed Shizune. Huh, what? Shizune asked. To Naruto's. You're coming along. Tsunade explained. With a chaperone present, no funny business would be going on and she could kick back, relax and just enjoy the sensation of not spending an evening in a bar, hotel room, tent or under an open sky. Why? Shizune asked. I'm not sure that I trust myself to get through the evening on my own. So you're tagging along for backup in case it's more than I can handle. Tsunade replied, a comment which caused a curious Mitarashi Anko, who had earlier spotted Naruto and Shizune when they looked into the bar she had been at the time and decided to follow them, to suddenly sport a truly impressive nosebleed and fall unconscious to the ground. More than one woman can handle on her own. Anko hollered as she woke up at Konoha's hospital 2 hours later. Talk about a kyuubi in sheep's clothing. She commented and then started giggling to herself, as 3 nurses came running to see what the new patient who had been unconscious up until now was making a ruckus about. Ladies, good to see you. Come on in. Naruto invited Tsunade and Shizune as he opened the door to his apartment, stepping aside to let them inside. He courteously took Tsunade's jacket and carefully hung it up, before he did the same for Shizune. It's a pleasure. He assured the two of them, captured both their right hands and pressed gentle kisses down upon them. And may I say that the two of you look absolutely ravishing on this fine evening. He finished and was rewarded with 2 faint blushes from his guests. Tsunade had sent word earlier that Shizune would be coming too, so he wasn't surprised by her presence, though it had caused him a bit of extra work. But as he'd already created a bunch of shadow clones to clean up his apartment, creating a few more to go through Jiraiya's books for something that could help him prepare for this odd date hadn't been too much of a bother. Unfortunately, he hadn't found anything about a date with 2 women at the same time. There had been dates when the character had rushed from one woman to the other and back to the first and so on. There had been stories where the male had dated one woman, then headed straight from that date to another. His clones had come across stories where the man in it had dated several women, but not simultaneously. All 11 books had been checked for tips and assistance, but he hadn't come across a single example where the main character had both his dates present at the same time, through the entire date. In the end, he'd realized that he'd just have to wing it. He'd had the clones mark everything that had with dates to do, then read those particular sections himself. As a result, he had a fair idea of what to do and how to behave with one woman. Now he'd just have to adapt that due to the fact that there were 2 of them. Include the both of them at times, but ensure that both of them still got some individual attention was probably important here too, just as it were in other situations. He just hoped that he would be able to cope with everything he had to keep in mind all at the same time and not mess up too badly. 2 disappointments in a row for Tsunade could be disastrous this early in a relationship. Which was why he was grateful that Shizune was there and that she had agreed to practice with him too. She could give him little hints and tell him if he was messing up too badly, which was great. Supper will be ready before you know it, he assured the 2 women as he released their hands after one final gentle squeeze. Perhaps you'd like to select a wine or some other drink for our meal while I pop into the kitchen right quick to check on things. He suggested with a nod at something which hadn't been in his apartment when this day started. The 2 women looked over at his wet bar with some surprise and he really couldn't blame them for it. Some of the stuff in Jiraiya's books was shit he'd never even considered having before, like the wet bar. He'd sent one clone off to buy some wine and various other drinks, created a second and it had transformed into the wet bar. He certainly wasn't going to buy new furniture, but transformed clones worked out just as well. At least for a single evening, as long as nobody bumped into the furniture too hard, which would dispel the illusion and destroy the clone. It didn't last forever either, it'd run out of chakra in a couple of hours unless he injected it with a fresh dose and at that point, it'd vanish. Which was a shame, otherwise he could have furnished his entire apartment for free. As it was, clones had moved most of his stuff into what Naruto had affectionately dubbed his storage. A room which he had no use for and had wound up becoming the place where he stashed all the shit he didn't quite know what to otherwise do with. After that, the clones had transformed themselves into furniture. As a result of this, his apartment looked much nicer than it usually did and had quite a few new additions to it. It's a really nice place you've got here, Naruto-kun. Shizune approved as she moved over to check out the wine selection. One tries. Naruto commented in a failed attempt to sound modest. There was still a bit to work on there. He strolled into the kitchen and walked over to the stove, lifting the lid of the steaming pot that was standing there and nodded in satisfaction. It was nearly done. It'll be done soon, Naruto announced from the stove. I didn't even know that you could cook, Naruto. Tsunade said from where she was leaning against the doorway, wondering just what in heaven or hell, most likely hell, had made her agree to go out on a date with Naruto. She was not at all averse to romantic dinners at her boyfriend's place, of course. The situation had potential, a lot of potential. But when said boyfriend was several times younger than her, things were different. Very different. Which was why she was grateful that Shizune had reluctantly agreed to tag along. Or had been grateful, at least. She had not failed to see the way Shizune had blushed when Naruto kissed their hands, nor had she missed the evaluating look the younger girl had used on Naruto in his apartment. I'm no Ichiraku, but I can manage, Naruto said from the stove as Tsunade made her way over towards him, sniffing curiously in the air, only to frown as she failed to catch any scent whatsoever. What in tarnation was he cooking that didn't have a scent, at all? There's just water in there, Naruto, Tsunade said as she glanced down into the pot. Oh, no, don't tell me that, she said, her gaze shifting around the small room, desperately hoping to see already prepared food stashed somewhere, but failing to find any. Yep, instant cup ramen, Naruto proclaimed enthusiastically as he pulled out 2 cups of ramen from the cupboard. Shrimp or miso, Tsunade-chan? He asked with an innocent expression. You're treating me, to cup ramen? She demanded to know with an incredulous expression on her face. There's not much else I know how to cook, Naruto replied. Jiraiya's books had mentioned all sorts of fancy food, but he didn't really know how to cook any of them and wasn't feeling up to the job of experimenting with cooking for something as important as this. So, he went with what he knew. Which was cup ramen. If Tsunade hadn't been worried about ripping her brand new dress, which she'd purchased earlier in the day for this express purpose, the evening would have ended right then and there with her punching Naruto out of the apartment straight through the wall. Naruto, let me tell you how this is going to work, she said in a strained tone of voice, and Naruto looked up at her with a somewhat surprised expression. You are going to put that ramen away, pour the water into the sink, shut the stove off, and then you're going to fetch whatever takeout menus you have. We'll all select what we want to eat and then we'll order out. If you don't have that ramen out of my sight within the next 5 seconds, the consequences will be dire. Sure. Whatever you say, Tsunade-chan, Naruto replied and hastily shoved the ramen back into the cupboard, silently committing to mind that food was apparently important for these sort of things and that not everybody liked ramen quite as much as he did. Grab a movie somewhere while you're at it. We'll be watching a movie together, Tsunade icily informed him. Naruto sighed. This wasn't working out quite the way he'd imagined. The naughty stuff was lots easier than these date thingies. From the looks of things, he obviously needed a lot of practice with dates, and he made a mental reminder to himself to see if he could find something that went into more details about these dates than Jiraiya's books did. Those were focused more on the naughty bits couples did, than dates and such, even if there had been a few dates spread out through Jiraiya's books which had given him some ideas for the evening. He obviously needed to know a whole lot more about them, however, considering how upset Tsunade was not even 10 minutes into their first real date.